Welcome back to another episode of the Four Inside Podcast, episode 25. I'm your host, Mike Obi. I'm really excited for this week's episode. Joining me is one of my old coaches and a guy who was very instrumental in my development as a young man. Without further ado, James Kowalewski. How are you doing, Coach?
Hey, Obi, I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you spending some of your time today.
I'm honored to be here, man.
All right. So where I like to go with every guest and with every person I bring on here is just to kind of get some of their background and some of their upbringing. I feel like people's backgrounds kind of tells the story of who they are. So just talk about who James Kowalewski was before he got into football and coaching.
Yeah, I guess I would have a unique path into coaching. I was not born in the United States. That's something kind of unique about me. I was actually born in Tokyo, Japan. And, my mom is a full-blooded Japanese woman, and my dad is from Rockford, Illinois. And after he finished high school, he ended up going into the military, was in the Army, was in the Vietnam War, and eventually after that had been, spent time in Japan, after his service. And that's where he met my mom. And so I was born in Tokyo. Lived there for about a year and then moved to Houston. And so that's kind of my background. Grew up at first, maybe in like kind of, I know we were in A-Leaf and like maybe some parts of Spring Branch. We lived for a period of time. But then really, I remember once we got to kindergarten is when we moved to Fort Bend. I grew up in a subdivision called Barrington Place. And so I went to Barrington Place Elementary, or Meadows Elementary, and then Barrington Place was built when I was a first grader. And I was there my entire way. I went to Sugarland Middle School, would have went to Kempner High School eventually. But then in 8th grade, and we moved. We built a new house in a new territory. And so I ended up going to Garcia for a semester. And then I finished at Austin High School in Fort Bend ISD. So that's kind of like my educational background. I went on to Austin College, which is a small private liberal arts college in Sherman, Texas. And that was really because, when I finished my high school football career, I didn't quite have the size and ability, to become a scholarship player or anything like that, but I wanted to keep playing. It meant so much to me. And so I definitely wanted to go to the D3 route. And that was a place that I just really felt comfortable in, really fit in with the people there. And so that's what I did. And that's kind of like as far as my background. Is there more that you want me to go into, or certain things you'd like me to?
No, it's actually kind of crazy, though. Our backgrounds are kind of similar from the standpoint. I was born in Houston, but, as far as elementary is concerned, I went to 3 elementary schools. So it was a place called Silver Lake in Pearland. Then they built a school called Silver Crest. I went there through 3rd grade. And they built a 3rd school called Massey Ranch. So just having to, understand 3 different surroundings and 3 different schools, they were all within, I think, 10 minutes of one another, but they all ran the schools differently. And then, 8th grade, I go through Pearland, go through middle school, go through junior high there. And then 9th grade is when I moved to Ridgepoint, and then that's where I meet you. So from the standpoint of just, having to understanding, different schools and things of that nature. And then also I went to Ridgepoint and Fort Bend ISD. And then after college, I went to JUCO as well. I went to Wharton. And so now I didn't play football. Football days were over, but just having to understand what JUCO life was like and everything. I decided not to do the D3 route because looking back at it, I was thinking about it, but, in the end, what it came down to was that I couldn't get a full ride. And I just felt like it wasn't worth the investment, So that's one thing that's fair. Different. Myself and yourself, but it's crazy how much of a similarity we have in our backgrounds.
Yeah, no, man, that's a good point you bring up. I really like the mission of your podcast, and I think it's a lot for the younger generation. And so I can tell you, man, there's no right or wrong answer necessarily. Like, I'm someone that did it, and I don't come from a wealthy background. I can talk a little bit about my parents. And my dad, as I mentioned, he didn't kind of go the traditional college route, and he spent his career as a correctional officer. So that's basically like a prison guard with the state of Texas. And, so not a very high earning job or anything, or a job that requires a college education or high requirements, but he did it, faithfully for his entire career and retired just a couple years ago from that. And that's the thing, is I heard your podcast with Jay Fan. It was really good talking about he talked about how, you put your life out on social media and you're trying to put your best life out there, and there's pressure to keep up with the Joneses or whatever, you know what I'm saying? So his career wasn't anything I guess most people would be proud of. However, like when you look at it at the end, he may not have made a lot of money, but going through a job like that in retirement has incredible benefits. He's got a great pension, and the medical coverage plan that he's on is phenomenal. I mean, he got colon cancer, and so he's combating that, and it's just like everything's paid for the most part. You know what I mean? And so like you could have a super high paying job, but then there's just other benefits to where everything just kind of balances out in the end. So that's one thing I would tell for a younger audience. Like, don't get caught up on necessarily like status and like just the amount on your paycheck. There's a lot of other things that factor in. You'll learn as you grow older and what you're looking for. But that's him, so that was kind of his background. My mom, was an immigrant, and I guess myself kind of. I was an American citizen because of my dad, but I was born somewhere else. But she was definitely, her home was Japan. I mean, she's a full-blooded Japanese. She could speak English, but learning it, and it improved and improved and improved. And I always like to tell the story that when she first got here, she was a daycare attendant at kindercare where I was going to school, and kind of from those kind of a humble beginnings of a career. Again, just most people wouldn't see that as like, a career goal per se. Now she's a general manager of a travel agency. Extremely successful businesswoman, made a great career for herself. The small company takes care of her. So it's something to be proud of. I know you've kind of shared your father's experience on prior podcasts and Jay's experience. So I have a similar kind of background of the immigrant kind of mentality and work ethic. And I guess the last thing I'll say, you brought up the college and the fear of taking on student loans. There is no right or wrong answer. I did it. I didn't come from a lot of money, so I had to take my loans, and I paid them back, So when I started working, after college, I lived at home the first couple of years. I saved money and I put a lot of it back towards my student loan, and I paid it off pretty quickly because I paid well over the minimum, which I would always teach my economics students. I can't remember if you're in that particular class or if you're in one of my other ones, but that's how I did it. And so it was a good experience, but at the same time, I could tell you it was a big price tag, and it wasn't necessarily necessary, right? I mean, it could have gone a different path, could have went somewhere, saved money, done other things. And I would say at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter where you go to school. And this may be kind of ironic coming from an educator, but I think it's all about like you taking advantage of opportunities and doing what's the best fit for you. So don't get caught. If you're listening to this podcast and you're maybe you're embarrassed about what your college plans are, or this, that, and the other, I really would, connect with me or something. I can help you, because it's not necessary to stress over that. You need to make sure you have a plan, you're dedicated to it. And lots of different backgrounds can become successful. There's lots of different paths to do that.
No, I think what you said is just everything. You just hit the nail on the head as far as everything I try to preach and try to embody with this platform, and just the message I try to, tell young people, especially like you're saying, is that first off, there's no one way to be successful or one way to have a good life. You can have it a multitude of different ways. Success is in the eyes of the beholder, and everybody's path is different. Everybody comes from different circumstances, different backgrounds. It's what you make of, the life that you're given and what opportunities you're given. The people who actually fail, if failure is a word, or like if failure is a thing, is the people who don't take advantage of the potential that they were given, or if they're given opportunities and they waste them, through not making the right decisions. And even with those, it's all about learning and about overcoming adversity, and always pushing towards something greater and something better for yourself. You have to live with the mistakes and with the successes, with the triumphs and the tribulations that you endure and you encounter. So it's your mindset. That's the main thing. That's the biggest tool that anybody can have. And just, the whole education route, again, it is what you choose to get into. Just understand what you're getting into is the main thing I would tell anybody, is that understand what loans are, understand how to pay it back. And if that's not something you want to do, well, then look at alternative routes, and don't be afraid or don't fall into it doesn't look a certain way. There are many people who have done every single pathway. It's just a matter of, do you finish the job? Do you finish the mission? That's the main thing you have to take away from it all. But continuing on, you talked about how your dad was a correctional officer, your mom is Japanese, and so talk about what it was like. I imagine it's a lot of discipline in the household, and so talk about what that was like.
Yeah, mostly from my mom, on my mom's side. My dad was a little more kind of just easygoing type personality, but my mom, I think Jay kind of alluded to this maybe a little bit, but not a lot of cultures feel this way, but especially in the Asian culture, there's kind of a big push on education,
Mm.
respect for the teachers, and your sensei and things of that nature. So I was kind of brought up that way. Um, and so I liked school. I mean, I was someone that enjoyed going to school. I enjoyed learning. And it was kind of an expectation, to try to do well. I mean, she wasn't the strictest. I don't want to paint it the wrong way, but she definitely always wanted to push me to achieve. But I mean, I guess as I got older and older, she kind of let me do my thing. And I typically brought home good grades. So I had a fair amount of freedom as a high school student. I didn't get into trouble or anything. I was pretty straight laced. So they trusted me. So yeah, that background was unique though. But I mean, it is unique being, a lot of, and you may want to talk about this on your podcast a little bit, but I mean, there's a lot of, racial justice issues right now. And so, it's being a product of biracial marriage, I mean, it's unique. It's interesting. And I remember, certain things that I can get into if you want to, or I don't know if you want to talk more professionally, but, you just feel different whenever you're going to school and like your mom doesn't look like everybody else's mom, you know what I mean? And some things like that. But those are some unique experiences that molded me. And I think just maybe hopefully that, along with playing football and being in a locker room with my brothers from all different backgrounds, like kind of makes you more tolerant, I think, and more just comfortable around different groups of people. So I'm happy for that. But like I said, quick story. I don't want to go too off the rails. I could talk to you all day, Obi, you know that. But I remember being young and like kids asking me, Jimmy, why is your mom Chinese?
Mm.
And because, you may not guess that by looking at me. And of course she's Japanese, but the kids don't know. And I remember feeling embarrassed a little bit at that age, and it's kind of embarrassing. I just wish my mom was like everybody else or whatever. Cause you just want to fit in when you're young,
Mm.
So of course now I don't feel that way, but I can understand, if you're ever struggling with that kind of stuff about feeling different or not fitting in, everybody goes through that. When you go through those kinds of issues all the time, you typically are probably going to think you're the only one experiencing that. No one else is going through it, but that's not true. And I highly recommend finding someone that's a trusted, source of yours to go. If you're having problems, talk about it. That's another big thing now is like mental health, right? A lot of athletes, Dak Prescott recently comes to mind, or Kevin Love, like, I think we in our country, we've had a lot of gender roles where like, you're supposed to be a man and be tough, and so now, or women are supposed to be subservient, and now women are showing they can achieve anything, and men are taught to kind of bottle it in and just be tough. And now you have these physical, specimens of pro athletes saying like, hey, they struggle with it too. So that's my point to anybody listening. If you are feeling down by any type of issue, just go talk to somebody, man. It is cathartic. I love it anytime, just to visit with somebody and share. And I would highly recommend that. Don't go through it alone. You're not alone. There's definitely help out there.
And everybody's kind of getting a gauge for why I brought you on here. Like literally everything you're saying, I'm just like, thank you. Like, because it's everything that I've ever tried to preach, ever tried to think about or talk about. I mean, when I was in high school and you used to coach me, I mean, you used to always talk about how I was a talker and I used to love just interacting with people. And I'm still like that. Now I'm just trying to use this medium to be able to expand my reach and to get a hold of more people, because you never know who needs it. And, who's in need of just help, and they don't know where to find it, or they're afraid to find it, or they're afraid to look for it.
They're embarrassed.
Yes.
I remember being embarrassed. Like I said, and there's other things. Like I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole, but like growing up, things were not always peachy for me with my parents' relationship. I mean, it was bad. It was ugly. It was not something a child should have to be exposed to, and you feel embarrassed. You think you're the only one going through that, and that's not the case. And so that's what I would preach to everybody. You're doing a great job trying to help people. That's why I'm honored that you thought of me and you asked me on here. But I can tell a quick Obi story if you want for the audience.
Absolutely.
I remember the first time I met you, if I remember correctly, it was after some kind of event I remember we were late in the field house and like maybe we had like spaghetti dinner or something. It had been some kind of event early on in the season. I just remember that.
It was our
And I just
freshman
remember you were
banquet.
kind of like the last kid there,
Yeah.
you know, waiting for your ride or whatever. And you just hung out kind of by the coach's office door and you just kind of stayed and started talking to us. And I just remember thinking like, that's why I say you're a talker. I was like, man, this is a kid that like loves his coaches. You know, he likes to talk and he's like really, I could tell you had a connection to coaches and you really looked up to him. So that instantly made a good impression. I guess you were a freshman at that time, you know? So, yeah, you're right. I pegged you as a talker right from that first time.
Well, okay. So, that was, what happened was I was a freshman at the time and that was after our end of season banquet. And, you know, both of my parents worked. You know, and they worked long hours. And so it was kind of just, I always understood that it was a matter of when they were able to come get me.
Sure.
That was when they were going to arrive. And that was just my understanding of life at the time. I wasn't one to complain about anything. You know that me playing for you. And so I was just in the field house and I was just like, these coaches are talking. Okay, let me go see. And I didn't know anybody either. So I'm like, okay, let me at least try to get to know these people. Let me get a gauge for them. Are they going to be personable coaches, or they're going to be the type where I just play for them? Because I played for both. And all of a sudden it was you and Coach Ruthard, and you guys kind of had a little bromance going on. And
that's my boy, man.
Absolutely. And
best man at my wedding.
Hey, you see what I'm saying? So, and I just we were just chopping it up, and the next thing you know, it's like been an hour, and then like my parents show up, and you're just like, bro, well, you're a talker, but I like you. And that's like,
yeah,
that was the beginning of me.
Hey, you know what though? That says a lot about, I guess, for a 14 or 15-year-old kid to be comfortable enough to like go have adult conversation. I think it's unusual. I think it's not unusual is the wrong word. Maybe that sounds negative, but it's enviable. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's important. You know, if you do want to get into a career in sales or something of that nature where you're dealing with people, you have to have that ability to connect easily with people. And I thought you were fearless in that sense. Like, I think a lot of kids would not be comfortable they would just go sit and look at their phone in the corner and wait for their ride. You know what I mean? So that's good, man. That was an impressive. I was impressed. Instantly, I was impressed by your character. And I was like, okay, I want to know more about this guy. Let's see, you know, what his future holds for the team.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Again, you know, my whole thing has always been that you should never judge anybody, and you know, you should always try to figure out what type of person you're dealing with by interacting with them, not just by looking at them. Like, I could have easily been like, oh, that guy looks a little standoffish, and I think people go through this generally on a regular. Like, they don't look like I do, so therefore I'm gonna have a certain prejudice against them. I mean, that's literally what we deal with the social distance we go through. People don't look the same, so therefore people are being told like, oh, this African American person acts a certain way, and then they see it in the media, and so then that's your reality, or that's your depiction of them. Rather than getting to know the person, I'm just going to say, you look a certain way, therefore I think I know you, but I don't. Right. So that was just one thing I always try to live by, is that don't judge a book by its cover, essentially. And you know, if a person makes a bad first impression, okay, you just put them, just kind of keep your distance, and then you see if they actually are better than they portray themselves to be initially. But I'm going on now. You finish college and you get into coaching, football. So talk about what made you want to get into coaching football.
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I could have covered that, I guess, in my background, but I'm glad you're bringing it up now, because I knew since I was a seventh grader.
Oh, wow.
Seventh grade is when I decided I wanted to be a high school head football coach, basically, at some point in my life. I was very obese as a child. That's part of the thing of, like, sometimes maybe like when parents are struggling and grinding to try to like make your life better when you're starting in a new country. And like I said, my dad was an American, but came from a poor, as a Polish ancestry in Illinois. And so he not a 4-year college guy. So, I mean, we were not very wealthy, you know what I mean? And so I think parents want to work hard and want to give you more, in a sense. So I was allowed to eat whatever I wanted for the most part. And my parents were working all the time. So a lot of time I was alone. And so I just had full access. I just remember I would just crush Coca-Colas and Cheetos. Like, that was my diet, you know what I mean? And bologna sandwiches. And I was a big kid, so I just kind of, but I was into sports. I was, like I said, I grew up in one place from K through 8th grade. And so I wouldn't say I was popular, but I was well liked. I had my friends for a long time, and I was into sports, and so I wanted to play football.
Yeah.
You know, I just always wanted to play football. My mom wouldn't let me do it in Pee Wee because, you know, being from another country, maybe she didn't quite understand it so much, and those are legitimate concerns about the safety of football. That's another issue that's coming up now, right? So she just wouldn't let me do it, and I begged and begged and begged, and finally at 7th grade I was allowed to do it. But you know, being a big guy, I was put onto the offensive line, you know, and if you know me now, I guess you wouldn't look at me and peg offensive lineman, but if you saw me in 7th grade, you definitely would say I was an offensive lineman. So that's what happened is throughout school. I think football is great though. Besides the brotherhood and everything that I wanted, like it also kind of changed my lifestyle. Yeah. You know, I knew I was overweight and out of shape, and so that continued on all the way into my 7th, 8th, and freshman year. I was still the same. I remember I was a 5'11", 220-pound freshman, I believe, at Austin High School. Not a good composition, not strong, not fast, you know, just big. And at that summer, going into my sophomore year, I just decided, like, I'm done doing this. I need to get into shape so I can move up in the program. And so I did I call it like a Spartan-like regimen. I just 100% elimination of fried foods, soda, sweets, chips, 100% eliminated. Ate a salad at every meal, you know, and I ran a mile every day in addition to the workout, you know, that I was doing with it, you know, for my other, you know, just the football workout for the summer. I'd run a mile on top of it every single day. Wow. And I came back for sophomore year and I was 6'1", 188. You know what I mean? So I kind of was getting more into like my present like frame, you know what I mean? But then as time went on, I was able to finish at like 6'1", 225 as I, you know, was able to pack on muscle going through off seasons and whatnot. So, and growing. But yeah, so football just was great, man. So I loved it. Also, whenever I was, when we moved to new territory, our house was still being built, but we had already sold our old house. So we lived in an apartment right across the street from Mercer Stadium. So there's that apartment. I don't know what it's called, but it's right across from Mercer and First Colony Mall. It's an older apartment. Like that's where we lived for quite a bit of time while our house was being, and that was in the fall as our house was being completed. And so I would walk to Mercer Stadium Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday afternoon. That was the schedule at that time. There was always a Thursday night game, a Friday night game, and a Saturday 2:00 kickoff. I went to every single one of them. That's what I did every single weekend. And it, like I said, it was a walk across the street. And that's where I really started falling in love with football. I mean, I remember I had the same routine. I'd buy the game program. I would buy like a Mr. Pibb and I'd buy nachos. That was what I did every single time. I sat in the same seat. I sat in the same seat on the home side, kind of like on the south end of it. I had my spot where I sat every single time, and it was cool. And I kind of sat in the same area where I could see coaches would come to scout, and they seemed to like to sit in the same area, so I could see them. I was like, oh, those are the high school coaches, and I just fell in love with the whole atmosphere, and I was hooked. So at that point, I was completely hooked, and I knew it's what I wanted to do.
It's crazy that you were able to understand that at such a young age too. I think most people go through their whole lives and not really understand what they were destined to be. They just go and they try a whole bunch of different professions. But it's also just your story kind of told you what you were going to do for you. I mean, from the standpoint, you knew, okay, you got into football. You were a big kid, as you alluded to, and you just had to develop a regimen and develop a habit. And those habits helped you improve yourself. And then from improving yourself, you were able to find what you love to do, which was football. It's crazy.
Hey, Obi, one other thing that I want to mention, and again, for people listening, like my parents are still married after, 40 years or about 40 years of marriage, but it was not a good marriage. I mean, it was very dysfunctional. Not necessarily like I was saying like physical abuse, but like extreme verbal abuse, extreme screaming, like constantly. And it was really rough. And so I think that's what I loved about football too, is it gave me normalcy. Like it kind of, I really didn't have a good relationship with my dad, especially at the time. I kind of gravitated towards my mom's side, as a kid, which we've since reconciled. So that's another thing I want to give people hope to. If you are struggling with a relationship with your parents as a child, those things can improve, if both sides are willing to come to the table. But yeah, I mean, it was awful. And the football gave me normalcy. It gave me adult male role models to look up to. And I kind of like how you were. I mean, I was the exact same way. I adored my coaches.
Right.
Like Coach Kitterman is by far, I had several good ones, but Coach Kitterman was my coach,
Yeah.
and I just loved, and I just thought he was a Superman. You know what I mean? And he had a wife and kids, and he treated them right, and he'd hug on me and tell me he loved me. And, that was stuff that I didn't get at home.
Right.
And so that was so cool to me and so empowering, was just this coach making me think I could do anything.
Right.
I wasn't a big offensive lineman. My junior year, I was a 195-pound offensive lineman starting.
Yeah.
Got an honorable mention all district nod and first team as a senior at 220. So I wasn't a big guy, but I thought I could do it. I thought I could block anybody.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that was because of coach and his good coaching. So that's another thing. Just for kids out there or anyone who's listening, if you're struggling with other things, that's what extracurriculars give you, not just sports, but a band or anything. Mm-hmm. Just that normalcy of what it should look like, and it makes you feel more confident, more powerful. Shows you, what things should look like, and so then you can hopefully maybe bring about change slowly in your personal life too if you have issues there.
Yeah, no, I'll go ahead and give you a bit of my story. I never really told you this, but it's, again, almost like looking in the mirror, like talking to you right now, because it's like I got into football mostly because I was overweight. I would say because I was big, hefty kid. I mean, I remember, I think at 7 years old, I was already 132. So, I mean, imagine that. Mm. And I was getting bullied at home as well as in school, big kid, fat kid. And I was only overweight one in my family, really. Yeah. And then, my brother played football first, so that's what got me into it. My brother played it at Pearland High School, which is, emerging and good program at the time. And so seeing them win all the time, seeing how he was able to change his body, because he was a slim kid who got big. I was a big kid who was trying to get slim, but, it was still a matter of we had the game to kind of have us have that camaraderie and things of that nature. And so then I was like, Mom, I want to do it. My mom was like, no. And so I was like, come on, please, and had to convince her. And finally, I played for this one team called South Main Mustangs. So I'm 11 years old at the time. Complete military. They were all African Americans except for one kid out of all 4 teams. And this was I'm not patting you on the back. I'm not doing nothing. If you cry, if you complain, you're gonna run laps. And if you continue to complain, then you're going to roll for the rest of practice. And they dared you to quit. It was like, look, we already got your money. You can either play or you can get out of here. So, again, the initial coaching experience, that's why I said I was trying to get a gauge for, okay, am I going to have to be just a soldier, or am I actually going to be able to have a connection with these guys, right? So that first experiment fails because, first off, I had to play with older guys at the time. So, I was 11, but I had to play with 13-year-olds because I was too heavy, right? And my mom was like, nope, I'm not doing it. So she took me out. And then she tried it again, luckily. And this time I played for this team in Pearland. We had 16 players. And I almost didn't make the cut. So their max weight that they allowed at that time was 160 pounds. I was 162.1, and I had to drop 2 pounds of weight before I could play. Literally, they're weighing you in, and they're like, you have to make this weight or you can't play. So I literally had to go run off in my helmet and in my pads. I had to go run off the 2 pounds, and I did it. And so then with that team, it was a completely different. The head coach that team was Coach Martinez. What I saw with him was he had a son who had anger problems. He acknowledged it, and you could kind of see them blow up. And the thing was, he never said, "Oh, F him, get away from me." He loved him even harder. He was even tougher on him. And then with me, it's kind of the same confidence that your coach instilled in you. It was like, look, you can do anything you want. We love you. We love having you here. I'm going to deem you a leader, blah, 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 blah. And these are your guys. You have to, lead them. So that's where the whole leadership ability and, being able to talk to different people and being able to interact with guys, that's where that kind of developed, was a coach empowering me to do so, as well as the rest of the staff. And just with that was my first instance of okay, football is actually providing a source of good, because I never really felt like I was a big guy, or a fat guy. I just was I play football, and I'm actually getting in shape now. So now it's starting to turn around. And then it's crazy. You mentioned your Spartan diet. Yeah, I told you this story about my junior year, where I went through some adversity, and I was really trying to figure out the whole body composition thing. So I went through I didn't even call it anything. If anything, you know, Kobe Bryant was a big influence for me at the time, and it was just about a Mamba lock-in. Like, okay, I'm really going to buy into turning my life around, turning this body around, and really seeing what I can do with this clay. And so what I did was, yeah, no fried foods, not even on weekends. No soda. I wouldn't even drink juice. But my food regimen was, I mean, it was crazy. I did the same thing. I never wavered off of one day. I would work out twice a day. And like you would see me, it'd be like, I literally remember y'all having to kick us out, like, bro, get out of here. We're trying to go home. And, you know, it's just crazy seeing our parallels. And, you know, my development as far as loving the game of football, really, before that off season, I think football was just an outlet. It really wasn't something I loved. It was something I liked because it helped me get away from reality, you know. And then in watching it and watching film and watching myself get better, that's where the obsession with football sort of came. So it's interesting to see, you know, first off, people's stories that are much like yours. It's part of the reason why I do this, is to see, like, bro, there's always somebody out there who's going through the same thing or something like what you're going through, you know? So finally, you get your first coaching experience. Now, I believe you mentioned it was at Clements High School. How old were you, and what led to that opportunity?
I guess I was probably 22 or 23. I don't remember exactly. So somewhere in that range, maybe 22. And it was actually Mr. Moran was the principal at the time at Clements, and he was an assistant principal at Austin. And so where I went to high school, he remembered me. So I was just looking fresh out of college, looking for a job, and I emailed him, and he called me right back. And that's the kind of guy that he was, you know, and he was interested, and we interviewed, and it went well, and I got the job. And he's now the superintendent at Waller, you know, which is a great community, and they do a great job. And it just shows like I'm not surprised he made it to the highest of his profession.
Yeah.
Because of stuff like that, you know, getting back to a kid. And, you know, it's this kind of person that he is. But, so Clements was great. I was familiar with it. I mean, it's really kind of a neighboring attendance boundary to where I grew up at Austin. So I was pretty familiar with it. And they were kind of like having a renaissance, you know, where Clements had been traditionally – they were one of the newer schools. I mean, I know Willowridge is the oldest. And then, Dulles is the oldest, and it went Willowridge. And then maybe I think Clements was third. Then Elkins and Kempner. I think that's kind of the history of Fort Bend ISD. And so, like many new schools, like Ridgepoint, like Travis, like Hightower, Marshall, all of them have had success as soon as they opened, right?
Yes.
And it was the same thing for Clements, had a lot of success, but then when they open Elkins, a lot of times what happens, then there's a decline, right? As Elkins
all their kids go to another school, it starts to spread them out. That's
so even when I was in high school, Clements was not a very as successful as a team as they were, like maybe when like Coach Darnell, you know, was a student and a star player for Clements. And, you know, I remember my senior year, my last game, us and Clements played for last place. It was like it was the last place game, basically. We were the two last place teams, and we happened to play each other, and it went to triple overtime. And we won. But that was just kind of funny, you know, the two worst teams in the district. We just duked it out. Because for us, it was like the Super Bowl. You know, we won in triple overtime on a fullback dive right behind me. And I remember getting dogpiled. Actually, no, that's how we scored. And then we had to get a stop, which we did get the stop. And that won the game. And we dogpiled on the 50-yard line. It was a great memory. But Columbus was trending back up, you know. So they had been kind of like a last place team for a while, but then they got a new coach named Coach Hume, who's now the head coach at Waco Midway, which is a top flight program. And you could just see it, you know. Maybe they were like 2-8, and then they're like 4-6, and then 6-4. You know, you could kind of see that trajectory going. They made it to the playoffs the year before I came. They had a shootout with Brazoswood. It's kind of part of town maybe you're from.
Freeport. My dad worked out there. My brother played against them numerously, so I'm familiar with Brazoswood. Yeah, they were really good at the time. And Clements had a shootout with them and came up short. Our quarterback was a sophomore at the time. A guy many people have heard of was Derek Carr. You know? Wow. Derek Carr was our quarterback, right? The Raiders' present-day quarterback. And his brother, of course, was David Carr, who was a number 1 overall pick with the Texans at the time, right? So the family had followed David and was living here in Sugar Land, a Sweetwater area. And so that's how we had Derek.
And so as a sophomore, they almost led him to a playoff win. So when I got there, my first year, he was a junior, and it wasn't just a Derek Carr show. It was just the grade above him was just a phenomenal class, kind of like you guys were in 2015. It was just loaded, top to bottom, and not with like a ton of D1 kids. Yeah. I think we had a safety go to Ball State. We had a tight end go to TCU. And that was it as far as D1 guys. And those guys didn't ever end up becoming like starters of those places. So it's not like we had Alabama, Oklahoma, LSU or anything. You know what I mean? Michigan, Ohio State.
Right.
But we had a bunch of great football players. You know what I mean? And they were just it was eerily like Ridge Point your senior year. Yeah. We had just a bunch of just solid high school football players, and we had a couple college level guys sprinkled here and there, not that much, not high level college, but it was just the perfect storm. Yeah. And we went 10-0, but it was funny though. That the thing is, if you look back at those scores, I challenge you to do that sometimes. I know you're kind of a stat head, of stats and stuff. Look at the scores. For a 10-0 team, we really didn't blow people out. Yeah. It was a ton of close games. And I think the reason for that was we weren't overly like super physically gifted, but we executed so well. We didn't have the ability to overwhelm people and win by huge margins, but we would win a bunch of close games and we just did everything right. Yeah. Those kids did everything right. And the coaches, we got great coaching staff. So that's kind of how it happened, man. It was a great run, 10-0, one district, several close calls along the way. Hightower, Elkins, Marshall, all nail biters. Went to the playoffs, beat Clear Brook in the first game, fairly easy. I was not there because I was out scouting a different opponent. For our second round matchup. And then in the second round, we beat Beaumont Westbrook. And they had Christine Michael, who went to A&M and was an NFL player. And then the third round was pretty cool. I told this story recently that we played Andrew Luck and the Stratford Spartans.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was Andrew Luck and Derek Carr squaring off in that game. The two future first-round draft going at it, and we got the best of them, barely. Both the Westbrook and Stratford games are both extremely close. So we're 13-0. Again, this is for a school that a couple years ago was like 2-8. You know what I mean? So it's like an incredible amount of success, and then we came across Katy, and that was the end of it. It wasn't Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton, I think, had just finished prior to that. It was Bo Levi Mitchell.
Yeah, I was about to say,
back for the Calgary Stampeders now, but they thumped us pretty good. That there was no doubt in that game, and that was the end of the run. But yes, that was my experience at Clements. I did stay for 2 more seasons, and loved it. It was a great place, great leadership, great kids. 100% loved it.
Okay, so then it's crazy just going through that and you getting to play all these guys and all these names where it's like at the time you're not knowing that these guys are going to end up in the NFL, and it's like, well, that guy made it, that guy made it, that guy. It's crazy. So then I
can tell you this though, for the listeners, man, Derek Carr was a great kid. Really? Like I always wonder that when you see guys in the pros, like I always like to know if someone that knew them or knows them personally or knew them as a high school student, like what were they like, And
yeah,
he was awesome. He was just great, very mature, but very respectful, very humble. And I was a first-year coach, man. He was like, starting quarterback. He would come talk to me all the time, and he was a super nice kid. And I remember one little story. I remember a conversation I had with him was at the time, this was still like when spread offense were becoming kind of en vogue. Like not everybody did spread back then like it is now. And Elkins was a school that kind of pioneered the spread. And also back then, because people weren't as used to it, it had an advantage of people didn't really know how to defend it. Defenses were maybe still geared to stop the run. And so anyway, the Elkins quarterbacks were just putting up extreme numbers. So was Dulles. Dulles was another team that went spread early.
Yeah.
And I asked Derek, because we ran a pro style of offense, I formation.
Yes.
And I asked Derek, I said, hey man, you're so talented. Do you ever wish you could play in a spread so you could have those same kind of numbers like the Elkins quarterback has? And he said, not at all. My goal is the NFL, coach. Like, I want to play in an NFL-style offense. And that's the first time, of course, his brother was an NFL player, so I kind of had, but when he told me that, I was like, that kind of vision, I was like, man, this guy might make it. You know what I mean? And he said that's what he wanted was to play that style of offense.
Yeah. And that just ahead of his time in that worldview of like, I don't care what these guys are doing now. I'm not trying to get on their level. I'm trying to reach higher,
Yeah.
higher
His
than
goal wasn't putting up stats, it's to make it to the NFL.
exactly. Because in the end, if you can play, you're gonna make it somewhere. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? They'll find you. But if you're a guy who, oh, I'm just gonna get by with stats now, it's almost like not cheating, but like you're just doing the bare minimum. But eventually you get exposed if you don't ever really truly work on your game, and if you don't really ever
Right.
maximize your abilities or what you're supposed to have to get and play at that level, you'll be exposed one way or another. So you coach 2 more years at Clements, and then all of a sudden Ridgepoint High School is created, and you decide to come over to Ridgepoint. What led to that decision,
Yeah.
and how was it different, at least from the beginning? Like, what did you notice that was different?
Okay, yeah. So when I was at Clements, I was in a T shack, so like a portable building outside of the school because it's an overcrowded school. And the guy next, and this was the fate, I guess. The guy next door to me was a guy named Brett Sniffen. So all you Panther fans know well, So he was kind of my mentor in that first year. We'd stand outside between passing periods and talk, and he was great. I mean, he really took an interest in me and helped me develop as a young coach and taught me a lot of things.
Yeah.
Even simple things that I guess when you're young, you don't realize. I'll never forget, we were playing, I coached the freshman. I was the offensive coordinator for the freshman B team my first year. And I think we were playing Travis. And I don't remember I don't remember who it was, but they played a 3-4 defense. I think it was Travis, and they would just blitz both inside linebackers.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to run our kind of complement of plays, like ISO and lead, like inside plays.
Yeah.
And they were just blowing us up. And at the time, you're a brand new coach. You're just trying to do kind of like what, I remember how simple it was. He just said, just run pitch, and you know what? And that, if they're just going to send the guys to the middle, I'm just going to the outside. And it was just so simple. But that's the kind of thing he would notice as this young coach is, first time calling plays right at the very beginning there. And, that I just remember that story and him taking the time to help me with that. And also just as a next door neighbor, he was great. And, and I liked him. And, as time went on, he ended up getting the job at Ridgepoint when it opened. Mm-hmm. And I was shocked. He asked me to come, he asked me to come to be the defensive coordinator, and I was still pretty young. And I was coming from the offensive side of the ball, so I didn't have a ton of experience. That was a lot of fate too. Yes. There were things involved, like there was getting into a lot of details, but there was a reduction in force that year. So basically the schools were having like some budget problems. Mm-hmm. And so some of the guys, he didn't have quite as much freedom as maybe he normally would have to hire his staff. Mm-hmm. There were certain restrictions, and like I had a lot of different things. Like I had the right teaching field that they needed. And so he just took a huge chance on me, honestly. For all those reasons, like I was someone that he could bring, and I definitely was not qualified at the time, but he saw a little glimmer of talent and hope, I guess. And he told me, he said, "Hey, DeCovo, the first 2 years are going to be sub-varsity. I'll teach you." And I believed him, and I trusted him. And I knew he'd get me ready to go. And I'm not saying I was ready for the first varsity year, because I continued to grow. I would say I wasn't a great defensive, or I don't want to say I was a great defensive coordinator, but I wasn't ready to do justice to the talent you guys brought to the table until probably your junior year. Was when I finally developed enough to figure out what the direction was of the defense, and we started installing it, and it started getting really good. But that's how it happened, man. So I was honored that he thought of me like that, and I was definitely down for him, because he was someone I looked up to a lot and respected. So I wanted to go. As much as I liked Clements, I wanted to take that next step in my career.
Yeah, and I remember just some of the stories you used to tell us. Like, one of the main things I'll never forget you saying specifically was, "Look, you guys, the one advantage that you guys have with me as your coach is that I'm young and I have the energy to coach you guys. But I'm also a student just like you guys, and I'm learning on the job, and I'm trying to develop and get better." So with you having that level of self-awareness in my eyes, I was like, okay, I could play for that. I could play for that guy because he's a learner and he's willing to adapt and not be rigid, because there are a lot of coaches and a lot of people. This kind of is a problem that you see in professional sports even now, is that the coach who's stuck in his ways and won't adapt, and then he ends up getting faded out, right? And your sort of moldability to say, okay, let me learn on the job. Okay, this isn't working. Okay, let me try to either improve at this, or calling a game, or simplifying a scheme, or going to clinics, which is something me and you talked about, like the
Yeah.
ability to want to learn and to want to get better was something that I was like, okay, I could always respect that. And
I think it's a trust thing, Obi. I think kids are excellent at reading through BS. And I think as another advice I'd give people is it's okay you can show weakness at times. You can show that you need growth. Like I think sometimes some coaches are so fixated on making sure that they're the smartest guy in the room and proving that. And I just don't think that's always beneficial, man. My personal opinion. I think me being very open and transparent with my players and building that kind of relationship, I think it built a level of trust and a level of feeling like we were all in it together, and I think that helped. I think that is one of I was not the most knowledgeable coach ever. I'm not going to say I was the best coach, but I think I did have certain strengths that I'm proud of. And I think that's the best way is be realistic when you assess yourself. I have my weaknesses that I acknowledge publicly and openly that I wanted to improve on, which I did work hard on, but also I think a strength, you want to acknowledge your strengths too. I mean,
yes.
I listen to your podcast with Jay Fan. He is just so humble.
Yes.
You could tell it physically pained him for you to give him compliments. Like he was in pain, not able to respond. You know what I mean? But I don't think I would tell Jay, Jay, be proud of what your strengths are too. And that's what I tell all you, anyone listening, know your strengths and be confident in them. And for me, I think a strength was I was able to get players to play harder than I think that they would normally play given their normal state. If just left in a normal state, normal situation, normal coaching, I think I was able to find a way to get a little bit more out of them, whether it's in the training in the off season or the physical play on the field or the intention in the film study. And I think that comes through mutual trust and admiration because that's how I was. Mm-hmm. I wanted to please Coach Kitterman. I would do anything to have Coach Kitterman or Coach Brantley, another coach, as a head coach at Elkins, he was my track coach. I would do anything. I would give anything to have them tell me that I was doing a good job. Right. You know what I mean? And so that's what I think that if you can build that, if you can get that in your kids, they want, they're looking for that positive affirmation. Yes. I think you can get them to play harder. And that's something I was proud of for sure in the coaching career.
Yeah, I can honestly say with you just giving us and being transparent with us and you kind of exuding that humbleness, it was like, we'll run through a wall for this guy. You know what I'm saying? And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And again, it's that when you would correct us, it's not like you're correcting us to insult us. It's shame us. It's like, look, you need to get better and I'm going to call you out on it. You used to always tell us look, when I punish you guys, it's not to punish you like you guys are terrible people. It's just, we have to fix it and we have to be better. And understanding that is, okay, well, I'm going to improve because we need to, this guy trusts me. He's putting his trust into me to be a better player. So I have to now, show by example and actually put everything into practice. And yeah, definitely. I think our defense for sure played much harder for you. And just because it was this dude has put in so much work to be better at coaching us. And we need to be better as players. And we need to be better as people. We need to hold ourselves accountable. And I think that kind of evolved, especially the more we got to know you, the more time we spent, the more we learned. It was yeah, for sure. We owe it to this guy to be able to execute for him, you know what I'm saying, to make him be right whenever he calls his plays. You used to talk about that, how when I was a junior and we played Stratford, you really feel I put Steve Van and Jay Fan used to tell me it's I put them in the wrong situation and I'm hard on myself for it. So then next year you correct it or you do what you felt, correct the problem, and then we execute. And I made you proud of yourself and of us, and it made us proud knowing that, look, we were able to prove this guy right, So it's that mutual trust and that mutual kind of adoration for both the players and both the coaches, which you don't always get.
That's what I loved about you guys, and that's what would just eat at me the entire offseason. You mentioned the Stratford thing in your junior year, and I had a similar schematic thing against Marshall in your sophomore year, and it would just eat at me because what really just broke my heart was that Stratford example was seeing Jay and Steve Van playing 100% effort, doing exactly the way that I coached them, but it was wrong. Right. I didn't put them in the best, even though I wasn't putting them in the best position to be successful, they did it. Just because they have blind faith and trust and they're coachable. And that's why it was so much fun coaching, because you guys were so coachable. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, in the offseason, I just swore, I'm not going to let that happen again. So a lot of study, a lot of just discussion with Coach Dober and Coach Hammond and how we want to approach it differently the following season. And but yeah, man, I vividly, I'll never forget that. And that was just to see them doing it exactly like as they were told, even though it was right. I was basically let them off a cliff is the way that I kind of beat myself up over that, you know.
Right.
But you learn, man. You learn, you make the corrections, and it didn't happen again the next year.
Exactly. I mean, but I think the important thing is that you were self-aware enough to say, okay, I messed this one up. Let me fix it. Many people, I think, say, nope, my way is the right way. You have to be better. Like, it's their fault. It's somebody else's fault. You were willing to take the blame and say, look, guys, I messed up on that one. My bad. Let me fix it. And so then when you used to call us out, or Coach Dober, Coach Hammond, Coach Favors used to call us out, we were like, all right, we'll fix the problem. You know, there wasn't this sort of like, nah, you don't know what you're talking about. Get out of here. You know, we didn't have that dismissiveness. We all were trying to really learn together because, like you said, we were all in the mission together to try to be better, to try to be successful as a defense, as a collective.
You know, another thing, when you have a coach, maybe with like if people are listening to this and they're thinking about getting into coaching, you know, with my kind of style of coaching, which I would say is kind of a positive players coach style, you do have to run the risk of your players getting too comfortable. I know you kind of talked to Kevin Townsend about that a little bit on one of your episodes with some of his coaches at UT at certain times. And that's a real thing, you know? And so I was aware of that. And Coach Sniffen did a great job of that, you know, of being aware of that possible dynamic with how loose we were and the way we went about our business is that is a risk. And so I remember I just felt like I'm going to treat them with respect, but at the same time, I have to be very vigilant about little things and holding the standard. So for instance, I remember we used to do that pursuit drill, you know, where you guys would have to like hit your chest and we had a rabbit and everybody would have to touch the rabbit, right? You know, when I say rabbit, for people listening, it's like a runner that goes down the sideline.
And you have to catch them.
Not an actual rabbit. It's a player that's running on the sideline and everybody's got to tag them. And I just remember
you have to do it again, and I hated it. But
that's the thing, though, because what ends up happening, Obi, when you get into coaching is like there may always be like the one kid that has to run the farthest something. He may loaf and come very close to touching, but just not touch. And I just made sure, like, if it was, even if it's like basically they had him, you just got to do it again.
Yes.
And then that's where that's the thing that, you know, if you're going to be a positive style coach, you also have to make sure to
hold them accountable.
Hold the line, right? You know, so that's something I try to be cognizant of.
Yes. No, it's a great point because I think that is a factor that we all kind of understood that, look, this dude, you know, will go out, he'll get in trouble, he'll get yelled at for it. So we can't take his niceness for granted. And I don't think we did. And
I don't think so either. Yeah.
And like
every now and then there was, like we talked about one of our other conversations, sometimes I would get upset if it got too loose, like in the weight room.
Yeah.
And I remember throwing a clipboard and breaking it one time, you know, stuff like that. So every now and then you got to drop the hammer, but with a great group of kids like you guys, it was few and far between, and it worked. And it was one of my greatest joys, you know, is just being a part of that.
Yes. And you know, the last thing, like you said, is just being able to hold us accountable. We knew you would hold us accountable. So it's not like we goofed off, or at least we wouldn't intentionally try to do it. It was like, okay. Yeah,
exactly.
Coach got on us.
You got too comfortable, right? You're having fun. Everybody's joking around. And so sometimes it's natural to slip. Yeah. And so I just had to really watch to make sure.
Watch the slip thing. You know. Coach Sniffen did a good job of being, you know, the sort of bad cop and you play the good cop. Because at the time, we wouldn't really understand it. Like, we would be having fun, and then we go out to practice, and then it was like Coach Sniffen comes and yells at us, and we're thinking like, dude, what is the problem? And you would always try to prevent us from turning on him. It was like, no, let's just focus and lock in. We were playing around, and then let's just do what we got to do. And so I think that was also a good dynamic of having a good cop, bad cop, and, you know, you understanding the type of group we had.
Yeah, you know, and to Coach Sniffen's credit, I thought that was good coaching, you know, and that's another thing I would recommend to people is just kind of check your ego at the door.
For sure.
You know, I mean, I'm not going to say it was easy to take the butt chewings from Coach. I mean, he's an intense guy, you know, and but I think I understood my role.
Yeah.
And the greater picture and I'm just always kind of been a team oriented person. And so I felt like I felt okay with being, you know, in that role, or that kind of, I don't know if I want to say sacrificial lamb, you know, but taking that heat because it needed, you know, what he was trying to do was elevate our level of intensity.
Yes.
And that's what he was really good at.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why. I think Coach Sniffen, and I don't know if he's going to listen to the podcast, but I think he's one of the most underrated head coaches in the state, in my opinion. And now I'm someone that I have gone on to I cover high school football games as my hobby now, because it's a passion of mine now that I'm no longer in coaching. And when you hear about the coach across the state, he doesn't maybe get the same due, and his record's impeccable.
Right.
The resume is impeccable, what he did at Ridgepoint and what he'll do at Belton. So anyway, just to that particular instance, like that's my advice to people. Even if your boss, your leader, is maybe kind of coming at you hard as some type of way that maybe you're not used to or comfortable with, I still think you got to understand levels of authority. And of course, he never crossed any kind of line with me that was just where it got. At a certain point, if it got dangerous or something, or you need to say something. I'm not saying just take anything, but I understood his method.
Yes.
I think for a lot of people, it might turn them off or make them feel, but that's why he was doing it. Mm-hmm. He was just great at challenging people. Yeah. Because I think I never be able to, maybe I can talk to him next time I see him, but I wonder if some of that was intentional. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm going to get on these guys, and I bet you they're going to raise their level. I bet you they're not going to like their coach getting yelled at like that, and they're going to play harder. And that's what he wanted. And that's what helped us win football games. And I'm glad he did that, because again, like I said, with my style, there could have been a room for a little bit of complacency or, too much fun. Yeah. And I think he was a great counterbalance to that, where we had that perfect mix to just get the best performance out of you guys.
Yeah, it was great. And, it's always hindsight is 2020. You understand.
You don't understand it then, right? But now that you look back on it, you may look at it a little differently.
Yeah, because, even me reflecting back and, as I got older and as I, stopped playing football, and I would, be around younger players who were playing at Bridgepoint especially, they come visit me or they come see me, or they'd be like, hey, I recognize you, blah, 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 blah. And they would ask me, what did you think of Coach Sniffen? What did you think of Coach Koval? Blah, 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 things of that nature. And I'm like, you won't understand Coach Sniffen when you're playing, or you may not, but understand that he has your best interest at heart. And that was something I can honestly say, like, at the end, I'm like, well, Coach Sniffen was tough on us. But then, like you said, like, Coach Koval was a nice coach, or, player-friendly coach. And then seeing it happen in, like, professional sports even, or, like, seeing other teammates go on and play in college, it's like, this coach was too nice and he didn't get the buy-in from the collective. It's like, okay, there needs to be that bad cop on every step.
Well, the funny thing is, if you ever got to know, like, we all know each other outside of, like, that you guys would never know, right? Because we're adults and we're coworkers, and if you ever knew Coach Sniffen, like, outside, he's a really nice guy. You know what I mean? Like, but he was just so good at flipping that switch to do what he had to do, to get the level up. Mm-hmm. And every person is different, every leader has a different style, and that's the style he chose to do, to try to better his team. And so I supported 100%, and I really respected everything he accomplished.
For sure. But now let's get into a couple of details about that team and about, your time at RP also, at least in terms of coaching us. Like, so that first year, you acknowledge, you get those first 2 years is like you're building a program, you're building a team, you're trying to stamp your blueprint on the program. What was that like, having to go through that in the beginning?
Oh yeah, you're asking me how it's different than Clements, and that's a big difference, right? Because Clements is just so established, like it opened like maybe somewhere in the 80s, I believe, and so it had been around. They'd had some success in the past. There was tradition, and things were trending upwards, right? I mean, even when I got there for 13-1. So my best season ever was my first year. Yeah. And then, as we maybe we'll get to later, my worst season was my last year. So that was kind of a cool dichotomy there. But it was all kind of set. Like, my first year at Clements, I walked into a gold mine. Yes. And it was just awesome. And Ridgepoint was different. I mean, it was nice that we were drawing from Elkins and Hightower, which are two. It was a great attendance zone of just talented players like yourself, and so we had that going for us, but it's very hard to start. It's very difficult, because you don't have any tradition. But that's the cool part too, is you get to kind of set the tone. And so we had to do really a good job of setting that tone. But it's not easy, because when you start a new school, like, As you know, good players a lot of times will make their varsity programs as sophomores, like really talented players. Like I was not able to do that in my career, but you did it, yourself was able to do it, and what happens is when you open a new school and you've got kids that were playing on varsity as sophomores at Elkins or Hightower, like they don't necessarily want to come. Yeah. They don't want to forfeit like having to play. And that's a sacrifice that our first class made is those guys had to play JV as juniors. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like they got 1 year of varsity play where they were getting that high level competition and the film, that they could kind of show for college coaches, and that's a sacrifice. And it's not, I understand players that would want to stay at their respective schools or things of that nature. So that's a sacrifice, and plus you're bringing in young people that have not been the leaders of the places they're coming from. You know what I mean? So you may have been a sophomore at Elkins, and all of a sudden you're a junior at Ridgepoint, and you weren't the man at Elkins. You were a younger player. You're a younger player in the program, and now you're the oldest player. So you skip a couple steps, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, you were able to go that normal, a sophomore to a junior, you got a little more of a leader, and then as your senior year, you kind of blossomed into even more of a leader, and they weren't able to have that same process. They had to go from nothing to 90, in a sense, like, yeah. And that's not easy.
And I can speak to it being in the program. Like, it's crazy. You're bringing the coach's perspective as a player. I didn't know that you guys couldn't get those varsity guys from Elkins and Hightower. And when we're talking about those two schools, those are two big name schools, even for Fort Bend. Like, when you talk about like Fort Bend football, Fort Bend ISD, first off, Fort Bend produces a lot of NFL athletes, and Hightower and Elkins is a big rivalry, and a lot of talented players have came out of there. So now you're not only fighting those programs, you're fighting the names too. I want to go to this new school, and
that's a great point. That's a great point, Obi. And you remember like kind of the, I don't know, maybe disrespect that Elkins had for us early on in that rivalry. And because we were just seen as
the new kid on the block who didn't belong.
New kid on the block. Maybe, it's a really kind of a nice, Sienna Plantation, really nice neighborhood. So maybe people felt that we were kind of like entitled or had a silver spoon in our mouth, relative to the play. Things like that. I mean, I could feel that was kind of the perception. And so it wasn't easy. I mean, I think at the very beginning, Ridgepoint wasn't a place that people like wanted to necessarily go to, and we had really low numbers at the beginning. I mean, if you ever do get to meet Coach Snippen again, I'm sure he can tell you this story of like me and him. Literally, we called every single male that was going to be at Ridgepoint High School on the phone, every single one of them, and asked if they wanted to play football. And we would drive around. I'd drive around Sienna in the summertime and like show up at the door and try to talk to parents. And like, we literally were just recruiting everybody, at the high school level. Like every single able-bodied male, was being recruited for the team because the numbers were so low at the beginning. And that's common in a new school, man. That first year, normally I would teach 4 classes. Like when you were with me or whatever, I had 4 classes. That first year I only taught 3. I had an extra off period. I'd go shoot basketball with Coach Arsenault in the gym. That's a little funny side story I never told you before, but there was so few students. Yeah. We couldn't fill a class schedule. So I had 3 classes. They were all very small. And that's the way it was because, we were growing into that building, But yeah, another thing I would tell you, if you ever get a chance to go back to the field house, Coach LaFavors is now the head coach, so you're still welcome.
No, I saw him.
He'd love to see you, man. Go in there, and if they still have it, look at the first. Coach Snippen always had it in his office, but the first picture of the Ridgepoint football team from the very first year, we played sophomore level football, so basically like JV B team level football that first year. Look at the picture. Yeah, and it's just crazy how far we've come from that to when you finish there.
Yeah, it was always insane just seeing us build a program from scratch. It was not foreign to me being a part of a new school or a new program because, I mean, like I said, the elementary school I left, or the last elementary school, that was brand spanking new this first year. One of the middle schools in my area was a brand new middle school that had just been built, took a lot of students from the middle school I went to. The same thing in junior high. Then in high school, kind of the same thing. Pearland High School is an established, high school at the time, and I was supposed to go to Dawson, which was a new school on the block. And, I was getting that kind of like, oh, you don't belong type of narrative about me even in junior high when you would tell kids like, oh, I'm going to Dawson. It was kind of like, yeah, you're less than us, kind of what
Sure.
Elkins
Yeah.
would do to us. And that's why, like, when I would hear that from them, I'm like, okay, like I already dealt with this. Like, okay, we're just gonna have to deal with this part of being a new kid. And so, and I also understood like having to build a program from scratch. And that's why when you would tell me certain stories, I'd be like, yeah, I've seen that before. I've had that happen, or I've had coaches who've done that, and that's why I could always relate with what you guys are trying to do. And then talk about also next is having to get the buy-in from the players, like into what you guys are doing, right? Because there's guys who are coming from these other schools, other programs. They're knowing how to do things a certain way. You don't really have leaders established, so now you're having to really create them. So what was that like?
That's a great question. At first, you almost kind of have to sacrifice a couple things. When you need to run a successful football program, you kind of need numbers.
Yeah.
And like I said, we were just recruiting everybody. And so I think at the beginning, we had to maybe be a little bit more lenient with what we would tolerate. If there were players that maybe weren't doing some of the right things, you kind of had to, maybe you were a little bit more forgiving because you just needed the numbers to run a successful football program. But then as time goes on with and we had good players in the first classes as well. Like I don't want it to come across like that wasn't the case, but the amount, you know what I mean? To really take it to that next level, you need a lot of players. So there's like super competition.
Yes.
Like in your grade, there were so many good players. Like we had backups at Ridgepoint that could start all over the place. You know what I mean? We had players that were not able to touch the field that were great football players, or not consistently. Like they were in backup roles, but they were awesome players. And that's good though, because that means you as a starter, your position's not safe.
Ever.
We have other guys that if things were to go sideways and if you were to slack off, like you're replaceable at that point. You just need that level of competition. And so that's what was tough early when you have so few. So that when I'm talking about the beginnings of Ridgepoint, how tough it wasn't, it's just the numbers were so low. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to get across. The kids were great. I mean, they were the foundation, and that really kind of set the tone. But as you get each new class, you gain it's strength in numbers. You just get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's when you could really start seeing the difference, that we were going into more of from being a startup program to like a fully functional system.
Yeah, so now talk about what that developing of the system was like as far as getting more numbers, because I was there to watch it unfold. And, now you're having a little bit more leeway. You're having more autonomy and more power to kind of run things the way you want them, because you're getting more kids into the program. You're getting move-ins. Ridgepoint's establishing its name as a program. So now you're starting to be empowered. But with that comes, now I can rule with a little bit more of an iron fist. I don't have to tolerate the same things. So what was that? What was going on with that for you?
That's correct. And that's a great point you made. That's another thing that I just thought of is like, you go from like kids that started at Elkins and Hightower, and maybe, I'm not saying this was the case, but maybe some of them didn't want to go to Ridgepoint for whatever reason at first, to now fast forward a couple of years, you've got kids that were at Baines Middle School and they've always wanted to be Panthers. Yep. You know what I mean? Like they never went somewhere else. And Bucky Richardson did a great job doing that, Ridgepoint Fort Bend Football League. Mm-hmm. And so we're starting to have young kids mm-hmm. that are wearing the Panther colors and like they're dreaming of going to Ridgepoint. So that's when it really starts changing, is now you have people that definitely like that's their dream, is to play for Ridgepoint. So that was another thing I just wanted to point out that helps. But you're right. Once we had enough competition and enough numbers, it got to that point to where if there was someone that wouldn't do it, I remember Coach Sniffen having that conversation with me one off season, that he just felt like, Kovo, we're there now. Like all that hard work, all that like building the program, like we are at that point where I feel good about where it's going. That was his great strength. I feel like Coach Sniffen was a program builder.
Yes.
He had a really good job of seeing big picture stuff. I think that's where he was extremely strong. I wish I had maybe a little more strength of that early on in my career at Aldine as a head coach. I need to learn that. And, he could see it, and he did a good job building. And I remember that conversation, and he just said, at this point, don't tolerate. Let people, we move them forward. If they won't do what you're asking, stop giving second chances or this, that, or, it's yes or no. Do you want on or not? I know Marshall High School has been great, and Coach Williams is James Williams is one of my most respected coaches. Mm-hmm. He's just phenomenal. He's got a great coaching staff, and they have a hashtag. This is like hashtag BMF.
Mhm.
And I didn't know what that meant. I was like, what does that mean? And I remember I asked one of the Marshall coaches, and it means bus moving fast. And what that means is the bus is going to go with or without you.
Yes.
And that's the point, that we got to, right? And so that's why Marshall has been so great, is they've just adopted that mentality, like, hey, this is the way we're doing it, on or off.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we did, and every good program does that, And so that was just a kind of a cool saying that encapsulates that. But that's what started happening, man. We kind of got to that place where Coach wanted it, and it just started rocking and rolling.
All right, so now you don't have to deal with so much building the program. Now you have it. Now you're starting to try to gain some respect as a coaching staff and for what you guys are doing. The players are buying in, and now you have varsity football. All right, so talk about what those years of coaching varsity at Bridgepoint was like for you.
And man, I don't remember when Coach and I had that conversation, but I don't think it was before we started playing varsity football. You know what I mean? Like,
I think it was
I think that first varsity year we still weren't quite there yet. I think he had that conversation with me after, because you asked me, it's like things are going the right direction, you got it how you want it, and then you have varsity football. I would counter that timeline isn't accurate. Mm-hmm. I still think in the first varsity year we weren't there yet. You weren't there. This is before, I guess you were a freshman maybe or something. This was like the very first varsity team.
Mm-hmm. I was there. I was a sophomore.
You were on the first one?
Yeah, I was on the very first one. I started. I think what happened was we played that season, because I'm remembering it again. We played that season, and I'll never forget. Coach Sniffen had a conversation with us before offseason began. He was like, "Look, the first year we got rid of selfish people. This year we got rid of selfish seniors. Now you're either in or you're out, and that's just the way things are going to go from here on out." And I was just like, "All right."
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm sorry. Okay, you're right. So, but that first year we weren't there yet. I don't think we'd had that conversation because we didn't play well enough. I felt like a big jump happened in that second year. Because I remember that, like, going into your junior year, that first game against Clear Creek, Coach Stiffen had very high expectations. So I think it was in that offseason preceding that he felt really good about it and the direction we were going. When your class of 2015 were juniors, he felt good about that core and that nucleus. And we didn't deliver against Clear Creek. And I remember that was a long night. I mean, Coach brought us back, and he told that, he just told us, he brought us in for a meeting in our defensive film room, and he just said, "Hey, that we're better than that." And we just kind of had a meeting where we decided what we were going to do going forward, and we ratcheted up the intensity even more. I remember a change we made was going live, good on good, to start practice. Mm-hmm. And that's something we continued to do. Yes. And that was I think it was a great decision that Coach made, and because I guess after a tough loss, you can kind of lick your wounds and back off, but that's not the direction he wanted to go. He took a risk by, when we were down and wounded, he went even harder at us.
Yeah, he tried to
extend the kind of that, do you want to be here or not? Yeah. And so people that maybe didn't want to continue to embrace the grind maybe would fall by the wayside, but he was able to find the ones that were dedicated through that method. And I think that's what happened, man. So yeah, the first varsity year, we were still figuring it out. We weren't quite there yet. And then into the second one, we improved quite a bit.
Yeah, I think it's the whole saying of, when you have coal, you put it under immense pressure and you see who's the diamonds that emerge out of it. I think that was what was happening. Look, we have talent, but clearly our talent isn't doing justice. We need to build ourselves up mentally, and that's the next step. And I think that first game against Clear Creek, my junior, I remember it because it was that one bothered me for some time, because it was like, what happened? Like, we really didn't know what was going on. And I remember that Saturday practice. He brought us in Saturday, full pads after a loss, and it was just intensity like you had never felt before. You're tired, and that was the point. And that was the thing. Like, okay, after a tough loss, who's going to pout? And if you're going to pout, go ahead and get out of here. And who's going to say, look, we went through a tough loss, it's time to overcome the adversity. And definitely, I think after that Clear Creek game, it was the butt kicking we needed, just to sort of wake us up and not let us, rest on the loss for too long. Like, get it out your system, let's go.
I agree.
So we get through my junior year, we have a good season, we go 9-3. we have our first, I'll get through this after actually. We go 9-3, then we go through that off season. Now my class is seniors because you've always spoke highly of my class specifically. What's the mentality going into that last season and just your last year at Richpoint, honestly?
Yeah. And I didn't know it was going to be my last year. I mean, going in, I had no idea that that developed later. But, it just kind of felt like I felt confident.
Yeah.
Not nervous. I mean, not nervous about underachieving because like the expectation was high at that point. But I kind of like I believed we could do it with this group. Like I believed we could achieve all of our goals. There was just something special about it. But it's kind of exciting. Like, man, now we get the chance. But also, it's kind of like it is scary in the sense that like, man, this is. I just want to enjoy every minute with these guys. Yeah. That I guess that was kind of the feeling that we all had was like, let's just enjoy every minute of this. Because it just was a special time, special group.
Yeah, no, I remember like that was the funnest season ever. Like just from being a football player, and it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to practice. It's like, no, okay, let's get to practice. Let's go.
Yeah.
And then I remember like that fear started to set in when the playoffs began, because first off, it starts to set in like you are a senior and you're in the playoffs. That means your career is over if you lose, right? And I'll never forget it. Like. We're sitting in the locker room, we're having fun, and it just kind of was like, yeah, if you lose, that's it. And I was like, God dang, right? And I think what it was that meeting where, you, Dover, Hammond, you guys are explaining to us, the playoff bracket. First off, we got messed over from the standpoint, yeah, we won district, but that didn't mean anything because our entire bracket was all either 10-1 or 9-1. And if you were 9-1, you lost to the team that was 10-1. And so you were like, look, from the jump, guys, we have to lock in because this is not going to be easy. And, we go 12-1. We have a good season and, we have some success. And, we lose to Temple and, our run is over, as far as my class is concerned. So now that season's done. What's your mentality? What's going on? What are you thinking when that season's over?
Well, yeah. So actually, at that point, I had known about Aldine when that season ended. Mm-hmm. It was during the kind of like towards the end of the season. Coach Sniffen encouraged me that he just it was just such an incredible season that we were having, and he just said, "Hey, Kobo, man, you're doing a great job of the defense. Like your value is maybe higher than it's ever been. Maybe you should look to see what's available if you do want to further your career." And that's what Coach Sniffen was really good about. Like in my case, was he promoted that. He wanted, even though I know he wouldn't want to lose me as part of his team, he wanted success for me too, and I appreciated that. And so I had never looked at the job board prior to that. The job board being there's like a thing where coaches can look for open positions. And I just never looked at it ever. Mm-hmm. I didn't look when I was at Clemens. Coach Sniffen asked me to go. And then when I was at Ridgepoint, I never looked at it because I was going to just stay there until I don't know when, But then, he told me to look, and I saw Aldine, and I just was really attracted to it. Aldine has such a rich history, and it's just kind of fallen on harder times, in terms of the football performance. And I like underdog stories. I've always kind of been that way. Like, yeah. I would have long arguments with other coaches. Like I'd find some underdog player that I liked, and I would just really believe in them. And I always stuck by those guys. And so I was attracted to that big time. Yeah. And so I had already kind of applied by that point. So we're right around when it was finishing. Mm-hmm. So that was just that was an emotional time. Because I loved Ridgepoint. I mean, I kind of thought of myself in a kind of like a Mr. Panther in a way, since I was one of the original people. And you guys know, I mean, I was young and single, no family. I mean, I spent every day at Summer Fitness. Like I was with you guys all summer, because I didn't have those responsibilities yet or anything. So I was able to dedicate everything to it. But so it was sad, but also exciting, to move on to another chapter. And but yeah, and I guess one thing you never got to be a part of, I think the seniors already left, but I remember talking to the returning team mm-hmm. when I left when it found out that I got the head coaching job at Aldine, I was saying goodbye. Mm-hmm. And I just told them, because there was very few returners coming back.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 5 of them, I think.
Maybe, and defensively, maybe like 2.
Exactly.
right? You know, I mean, it's very senior heavy defense. And I just remember telling them just to not to devalue themselves, to value their worth, you know, like you're going to read newspaper, you're going to read magazine articles that say that you've lost too much and that Ridge Point is the big question mark now. But I just said, always believe in what you can do. I know you can do it. You know, I've seen it. I've seen you guys, and I believe that you're going to do it. And sure enough, they go even farther the next year.
That was crazy.
Even farther the next year, you know? So that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So just wrapping up your time at Ridge Point, you know, a couple just quick questions I have is like, out of all the games that you coached at Ridge Point, what was your favorite win and what was your toughest loss?
Great question. Favorite win was Elkins. The first game against Elkins.
Really?
Yeah. The reason being, like, I just felt like there was so much lead up to it. You know, it just was so much anticipation.
Yes.
And that was another thing, just like being a new school, like I would coach basketball, you know, after my football season was over. And so coaching, like I was coach freshman B or JV or sophomore team basketball. And like those first couple of years when we were new in all sports, like Elkins really kind of pounded us in a lot of different things. You know what I mean? And it just was, so I just really wanted, and I just heard a lot about how, you know, we were new and we hadn't done anything, and they were a great team and having a lot of. I just really wanted that one, you know. I just wanted it bad, and so that's what I remember. Is typically before a game, I was pretty loose and easygoing. We played music, and that's the style that we had, was listen to music and dance, have fun. But I remember the Elkins game, like I was locked in. I had a different mentality. Like I was on the verge of tears. Like that's how, even before the game, just for no reason, just because I was just that hyped and focused and. That's why I would say that one was probably my most fulfilling, just because it just was so much emotion was involved in it. There's others too. I would also say if you want a close second would be beating Marshall the year prior.
Yeah,
that was a similar thing.
Number one.
That might be number. Man, you know what, Obi? That might be number one. It's pretty dang close.
It is close.
I would take Elkins. Just because I felt a little more of a rivalry with Elkins.
Absolutely.
Maybe, even though Hightower and Marshall are also kind of like rivals, like I feel like Elkins was the real rival, and so it was even more fulfilling. But that was a good one. And you know, one thing I've talked about with you, a really good memory from that, when they beat us so bad the sophomore year. Before that, your sophomore year, you know, and that next year nobody gave us much of a chance, and that was a big program swinging victory.
Yeah,
you know. By the next year, people knew we were good, right? When you were a senior, people already knew. This first year, there's still maybe some question, right? Mm-hmm. You know, we didn't do well our first year, very well, you know, relatively speaking, and then had a couple embarrassing losses to like a Stratford and Marshall and big blowouts. And then starting the next year, we talked about, we lost to Clear Creek, so we didn't get off to that hot start that we wanted. And the thing about Marshall, and just on a personal note, if any of the Ridge Point family listens to this, I don't know if you're going to share this to like the Panther football group or anything, but you know, we lost one of our brothers. You know, Chris George passed away a couple years ago, and that I have a vivid memory of him that I shared, you know, at his his wake, you know, at their funeral. You know, and it was just I just remember that game so much. Like I remember we beat him at the end. I remember one of your guests, Jay Fan. Yeah. I sent him on a will blitz. And he hit the quarterback and forced kind of an errant throw that Jordan Tolbert intercepted.
Yes.
And again, this is a very talented quarterback and running back combo from Marshall at the time. But Jay just doing what he does, got through there, put a big hit, and led to a big interception. That kind of sealed the game for us. And one of your other guests, CT one time, Cameron Townsend, I remember he was the first guy that I saw. Yeah. And we just hugged and we were just saying, you know, we did it. And that's a beautiful memory of mine. But also I remember Chris George celebrating. Yeah. I vividly remember that, just seeing him kind of just like, you know, screaming and yelling and shouting, kind of like just kind of pumping his fists. And he's so excited. And, you know, he didn't play one play of that game. He didn't play one single play. And I shared that at his funeral. And that's just the kind of guy that he was, you know. He was the ultimate thing that you want on a football team, you know, and I miss him, man. I love him, and that kind of character is something that just his life would have just been so successful because he had that in him.
Yes,
you know what I mean. And so that was hard. So that's another, you know, we bring up another big win. Those two are the ones that come to mind. Those are probably my two favorite. it was fun beating Foster just at the U of H, at TDECU, and that was just such an intense game. And they were really good. Gosh, that was a hard game.
That was a hard game. That was like, first and foremost, rest in peace to Chris George. Ultimate team guy, ultimate teammate. Definitely that was a unfortunate thing that happened. But with Marshall, that was just that win that kind of solidified us as a program. I remember Cam Brown saying it was no longer about who we had to beat, it was who had to beat us. And I really felt that was that moment where, okay, now Bridge Point is legitimate. Finally have beaten someone. Because before then it was like, yeah, they beat this team, but are they really that good? And that was the first win we had where it was like, okay, no, these guys are
open some eyes.
Right. And I felt like with Elkins, like you said, that was my favorite win because, like you said, it was just the trash talk. And like that game was so emotional. I remember I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't hear any of the music because I was so just wired. And it was like we have to beat these guys. Like I'm tired of hearing them talk. And I remember
was that our homecoming or no?
No, that was the week after.
But that game was on the Cube. I remember it was on TV.
Yeah,
I remember the long TV timeouts Thursday night. And I remember just that game was completely sold out.
Yeah.
I mean, there was not an empty seat on either side, which you very rarely see these days, So that was, that's why that one really, really stands out in my mind.
Yeah, that one, it was loud. It was stressful. But it was everything that you love about football. And I just remember, a little side story was, we had our homecoming the week before and we played on a Thursday. And
That's right.
Elkins played on a Friday. So Remus and Deontay and, a couple other guys were like, yo, let's go watch Elkins play. And I remember us getting there and, we're in our Bridge Point polos because it was Spirit Day and everything. And, people are giving us side eye and making comments. And so I'm like, okay, well, mincing. And then it was like just that disrespect factor of like, y'all don't belong and blah, blah, blah. So definitely that game was really emotional. And I said, to CT, I'm glad we won because that's one of those losses that just stick with you if you don't win. Foster was probably, in terms of a win, like I was so stressed out after that game because as a player, that was a tough game to win because they did the sprint out action, so it was tough to pass rush. You're getting frustrated because you're trying to get the quarterback, and as soon as you think you got him, it's out of his arm. And they ran their routes perfectly. They were very talented, had a lot of speed at wide receiver. And they really were going to challenge you downfield and everything. So again, that was a big win. It was only a first-round matchup, but it was like one of those things like you knew that you just beat a really good football team. So,
hey, to answer your other question of the worst loss, the worst loss was the year prior to Stratford for me.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, even I know you and CT. It really touched my heart that you guys are still so beat up about the Temple loss, but that one, man. That honestly, yes, that one didn't hurt me so much just because I felt like, man, we really left it out there. I mean, it hurts that we played really good defense, especially that game, stopping the run was what I thought would be the hardest thing. And we did that, so that, I felt fulfilled after that one, but I felt empty after Stratford because that was the one where, again, expectations were high. They had throttled us the year before at Mercer Stadium. But I was like, man, we are better this time. We're going to make it. We're going to stand up to them. Mm-hmm. And that was where, again, I felt like I made a tactical error in the way I was teaching my inside linebackers. And it was just that powerless feeling of watching it happen over and over and over and over and over again. And I know one of the questions you asked me or in our notes leading up to this was about making an adjustment in game, and doing it faster. And that game was where I really honed my craft in adjusting faster. Yeah. And we can talk about more. I know it's one of the segments you had, but that game, I beat myself up over that for a long time. That was my most demoralizing defeat. I put a lot of it on myself because I knew that year you guys had the physical ability to play with them.
Yeah,
it wasn't anymore that we were getting blown off the ball. Like the year prior, like now we could stand up to them, but we just had a couple little things that a good team like that's going to take advantage of. And I wasn't able to put you in the right spot. And so I feel like I wanted to guard against that. And honestly, going into your last year, my last year as DC, I can confidently say there was 0 times where I felt like I put you guys in a bad position. Yeah. I honestly feel that way. Like we were we were in position. We gave ourselves a chance to win. So that all stopped after that Stratford game. So that's why it was such a hard loss. But that's the thing that I think you're trying to teach in your podcast is don't just beat yourself up over the loss. What are you going to do about it? You know, and so that opportunity from the loss made me accelerate my knowledge of our defense tenfold. You know what I mean? And it made us better. And it maybe had we won that, maybe had we somehow found a way to win that game, and I wouldn't have done the introspective stuff and improved some things, maybe we wouldn't have been as good the next year and won some of those tough games. So that's my biggest thing, man, is when you go through adversity in your life, and it's going to happen, it's hard. It's very difficult, but try to find what they call the silver lining. Like, how can you build from it? What can you take from it? And don't just beat yourself up over failure. That's what Jay was talking about. Like, don't feel ashamed or embarrassed because you failed.
Yeah.
You know?
Sure. No, it's great, and 100% agree that, you know, in the end, adversity is going to come in life. It's just part of it. What are you going to do about it, you know, and how are you going to be better? And sure enough, we were. You know, the Temple game, yeah, that one stings because it's like it's your last game and everything. But, you know, that is true. We did play them, you know, as well as you really could have played. Yet made mistakes, but so did they. I mean, it was one of those games, like I said.
Yeah.
Played 10 times out of 10. I know you say 6-4, I say 5, but bottom line, it was going to be close. I mean,
I say 6, and to clarify for the listening audience, I say 6-4 Ridgepoint.
Yeah. Yes.
You know,
yes.
Honestly, Obi, man, I think I would say maybe 7-3 Ridgepoint. I mean, I honestly thought we were much better than them because their strength of like running the football, that was our strength too. Yeah. And we neutralized it, but they were able to make some big plays that I think wouldn't happen consistently again had we played them. And our offense did a great job. I almost kind of think maybe our matchup with Foster was more 5-5 or 6-4 Ridgepoint. And I'm not trying to upset Temple people or anything, but and they did great. But I honestly, me personally, and again, just from my defensive perspective, I felt like Foster, I felt less in control sometimes. You know, or against Temple, I felt like we were in control for a lot of it in the front, you know? So, yeah, I'll say, let's just say 6-4. They did beat us, so maybe I'm going a little overboard saying 7-3. So I'll say 6-4.
The only reason why, you know, for me, from my perspective, is that I always felt, especially with my talent ability and how much I understood our scheme in the game at the time, we stopped the run, but it was very difficult in game. Yes. What I mean by that is that Temple had a very strong, gritty country boy O-line. They would sling. They would double team you. They were not afraid to play dirty. With Foster, it caused a lot of stress because of their passing game and everything, but I honestly felt way in control of their offensive line. Like, for a defense,
you're right. That's a great point. For a defensive lineman, Foster was probably nowhere near as physical for you.
Yeah.
So for you, it wasn't as physical, stressful as a game, but like for our guys in the back end, they had to really bring it. So, you know what I mean? And so that's pretty cool that it's different with every matchup. You know, I would say. And another thing, Temple did a great job. We always did a lot of shifting.
Yeah.
They were one of the first teams that really handled that. It brought us zero competitive advantage at all, which we always got a couple jumps or a couple mistakes from shifting at the last second. I don't think it bothered them one bit.
No, it was that, and also, you know, I felt like with being able to control the line of scrimmage, Foster couldn't run the ball on us. Temple couldn't run the ball on us either, but it was a matter of, I think they caught us on a bad day. So, I mean, you know, thinking back on it now, they really weren't able to run the ball that effectively, which is correct, like you're saying. You know, maybe it was the fact that, like, when I replay it, it's like, you know, we made some very uncharacteristic mistakes, you know, blew a couple of coverages and fumbled and things of that nature. But I just remember when that Temple game was over, it was like, dang, we lost because it was, you know, it bothered me because it was my last game of the season. But then looking back at it, like that Foster game, I was very stressed out. Like, I was just like, bro, like, we beat these teams, and I feel like we really could have lost at any point.
I know. And I look at the score, and I think it was like a 10-point. It was like it was a little bit of a bigger margin, but it felt to me like a coin flip, man. It just was that intense.
But bottom line is that, you know, we played some really good teams that final year of varsity. And that playoff run, I mean, we said it at the very beginning. Whoever got out of our bracket was going to state. And sure enough, team that got out went to state.
Yeah.
So, last thing is, you talked about it, you learning and you having to learn how to adjust on the fly,
Yeah.
running a scheme, things of that nature. First question I want to ask, because I never asked you this, what made you want to switch to a 3-4 instead of a 4-3? Because I got a lot of questions from like parents and things of that nature.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
Okay.
Me being a player at the time, I'll tell you, it was like, man, you guys look small. You guys don't have the look of like a KD 3-4, and we were running a 3-4 defense.
Uh-huh.
So I was getting that question a lot, like, why are we running it? What is the advantage? You're too small. Do you guys think you can run it? I'm like, that's the scheme we're told to run, and we're bought in. So, that's what we're doing. But what was your mentality? What was your approach, and what brought you into it?
Yeah, I don't address that. I don't understand that logic because
Yeah.
most conventional wisdom would tell you when you're smaller, you need 3 D linemen in a 3-4 and you need 4 of them in a 4-3. So typically people, smaller teams will go to the 3-4. But what I liked about it wasn't necessarily, yes, I felt like our makeup was we had a lot of good speed. I thought we had good team speed. I thought we had a lot of guys with body build was kind of in a tweener position. We didn't have like mammoth people or anything, and a lot of times in those 4-3s, you like a big, like your brother, you like a 6'4", 6'5" defensive end, bookend defensive end, long wingspan. You like that kind of guy. But, in the 3-4, what ends up happening is that the 3D linemen almost are more like 3 defensive tackles in a sense, but they can play a 5 technique. But those guys are essentially kind of eating up the middle, whereas a 4-3 is more of an attacking style of defense and getting up the field. And I didn't think that was our best for us. And also I really, from my prior experience as an offensive line coach, where I cut my teeth and where I started my career, I always felt it was easier to play against a 4-3. I felt like the 3-4 defense gave us a lot of problems, like on like the backside of a play, like where Torian had so much success in that 4 technique. We had so many problems with that, and like with 2 inside linebackers now that you have to get up to, you have to like double up to those. It just, I thought the 3-4, and I liked having 5 guys on the line of scrimmage against a tight end, and so I just thought it was the best of both worlds for all those reasons. I really gravitated to the way you mentioned Katie, but I love the way that Stratford does it, and also that Klein Collins does it. When my brother was in high school, they played Klein Collins, and I remember thinking it was so weird. This is the first time I'd seen a team that played so far off the ball, like maybe almost like, it felt like almost like 2 yards. It was just like oddly like why are they sacrificing so much space? I'm thinking like Ryan played for Travis. Dude, Travis, just run the ball. You're going to easily get positive yardage. And what I found was, yes, they weren't making tackles in the backfield, but Travis could not consistently generate offense. Yep. It was just always, they were building a wall.
Yeah.
And by backing up, it makes you harder to block. And so they were harder to block. They could defeat blocks. They never ran up the field and created like alleys, and seams for runners. So it was always like gain of 2, gain of 2, gain of 1, gain of 3, gain of 2. And you frustrate people like that. You don't give up big plays like that. That's what we were really good at, both in the secondary and in the run game. We didn't give up big plays. We maybe didn't always get as many explosive blow you up in the backfield because it wasn't our style to like get penetration as much. But we stuffed people at the line of scrimmage. That's what I was always most proud of. Is I like that feeling of it's like we just stuffed them, and it frustrates them because they're not patient enough. Yes. What they should do against our style of defense is just continue to take some 2-yard gains or throw a hitch, for a 4 or 5, but take those small gains, but stay with it. And teams inevitably can never do that, and they abandon it, go to something else. That's why I liked it. I love the discipline of it, and I went to a clinic with Stratford's coaches. Because, like I said, I first saw it at Klein Collins. I first saw it and liked it. I liked backing off the ball. And I saw Stratford was doing a similar thing. They played off the ball, and they played the style that I liked with safeties that really fit in there hard. I used to always say safety was an important position in the Ridgepoint defense. And so we had 2 really good ones that you played with because like those guys had to play pass, but we also expected them to get in on the run. And that's another reason we're so good against the run. Besides the front 7, those safeties were a big part of it. But anyway, I learned it at a clinic from Stratford. Elliot Allen was the head coach there when you played, and he's now the head coach at Brenham. Awesome coach. He was at Stratford for like 16 years before he went to Brenham, and they were always good. And he is just is a good person that we were in the same district. We're going to play them.
Yes.
And there's no secrets. He shared with me everything, what they did, how they did it, because he just wanted to help another coach. And that instantly made me gain respect for him. So if you live out in Brenham, you're listening, you got a good ball coach out there. He's a great one. Yeah. And like I said, no ego, no selfishness. He's just a good person. Yeah. And that's why I think a big part of his team's success, but he helped me. He shared everything with me. And so finally, like I was telling you, after visiting with him, I finally had my vision of what I wanted our defense to look like. I finally had that identity, and we were able to buy in. Our coaches were all on the same page, and you guys got onto the same page. And that's when we really started playing better. Because that's another thing I would tell for a career or whatever. Trust yourself. Like you hear a lot of times, like bet on yourself. Like Dak Prescott this year, he bet on himself.
Yes.
Yeah, it didn't work out, but for him with the injury. But like after that last game, his value might have even continued to go up. Even after getting an injury, you can kind of see what he believed in himself, and I think it's going to work out for him because he's a good person and he's a good player. And that's kind of how I feel for anyone listening. Like at the end of the day, do it the way you want to. At the beginning, I was too new and naive, and I was just trying all these different things. And eventually, you got to put your stamp on it. Yes. You got to really do a lot of introspection of what you want, and you got to go make it happen. And that's what I did by learning from Elliott Allen. And getting my guys on my coaches on the same page, and they were awesome. Coach Hammond, Coach Dober, Coach LeFavors, those guys, they were great, and so we were all on the same page. And I think another thing I'm really proud of our style is I thought I did a lot of teaching you guys why.
Yes.
I think that's important as a teacher to do that in your classroom, but also as a coach. Like my style has always been, instead of like just doing a bunch of blitzes, and like, hey, Obi, go to this gap. And then on this play, go to this, do this. Like, I don't like that. I like to just play a base defense, but explain in great detail, not just what you're doing, but how that impacts the person behind you and the person next to you. And you do that at every position. So an outside linebacker should know how it fits the safety and the defensive end. Mm-hmm. A middle linebacker knows how it fits the nose and knows how it fits his defensive end. And I always saw the defense in triangles like that.
Yes.
I saw the defense in groups of 3 positions. So a nose guard, a Mike, and a 5, a 4 technique, a Will, and like your Lobo or Robber, whichever side, so that's the way that I saw it. And that's how we taught it. And I think what ends up happening is now the players are smarter. And I think that's how you guys got so smart. You just became your football IQ really shot out the roof because instead of just sprinting to a gap, you started we looked at film, you understand okay, how do I fit this? Yeah. And we were always in base. And so we learned how to fit all the different plays in base defense. So you learned how to read blocks. That's another thing I don't like when you blitz. You kind of maybe sacrifice reading blocks. Mm-hmm. And I just thought you guys got so good. And so but that's just my style. That's what I believed in. If you believe in blitzing, just get really good at teaching blitz and teaching the coverage behind it. You know what I mean? But my personal, if you want to talk football with me, I don't like blitzing a lot. Yeah, I would blitz, but I liked it as that surprise curveball that gets you the big play. And we did it against Foster a couple of times with Justin Jackson. We got through on a couple of big ones. So that's the way I liked it. But and then to answer I think your question was alluding to how I learned to make adjustments. That was a Stratford game. I really beat myself up for not being able to adjust enough. And so the way I did it was a lot of off-season study, but also a lot of relying on my coaches that were with me. Coach Hammond and Coach Dober and Coach LeFavors that last year. And what I always asked them, I said, guys, in my personal opinion, whenever there's certain plays where you just see somebody gets beat and it leads to a big play, I'm okay with that. If Michael Obi if they tell me Obi just got double teamed and he gave up too much ground, that's why there was a hole. Then I'm like, okay, we'll talk to Obi, we'll fix it. But every now and then there's a certain schematic thing, which I call a gotcha. Mm-hmm. You can just see oh no, I put them in a bad position. The way that we're playing right now, that guy is in too much stress. He's not going to make that play. Yes. I felt it's unacceptable to try to fix that after the drive's over and you give them a touchdown. I think the good coaches are the ones when they see something like that, where it's they schematically got you need to fix it immediately. And it's impossible to do that unless you've done pre-planning. Mm. And so that's what we did. That's what I always ask my guys. Say, guys, what do you think they can do to hurt us? Based upon the film that we've seen and based upon the film that they're watching of what our weaknesses are, what do you think they're going to attack? what bind, we call it put them in a bind. What kind of bind do you think they're going to try to put us in? And so we would list them. Like, I think they could hurt us doing this. I think they could hurt us doing this. And then the next question, okay, I agree. We know we got to be like, and we always try to limit it to 3.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd be like, give me your top 3. I like to think in 3s always. Give me your top 3. Because if we list like 18 different ways they can hurt us, that's not have to be there. And also, we can't teach all those different things to you guys. And so anyway, we'd come up with the top 3. And then the question is, if they find this and exploit this weakness of our defense, what are we going to do? And that's where guys like Coach a lot of times it was something like the way that we played our defense, maybe they could like throw a bubble real quick or something. And so we could just change the way like the cornerback's going to play that. So if he sees that, like the corner's going to come take it. Or this, like, for instance, if we know that we want to play our outside linebacker closer to the line for run, they're probably going to throw a bubble, right? When they see the outside backer come closer, they're going to throw a bubble. Yes. So we just had to be ready. And that's what Coach Hammond was so awesome at teaching those guys, like understanding whenever like you see the outside linebackers playing tight, expect the bubble. Like be that mental aspect to understand what they're going to attack based upon what we showed them. And that's what happened, Obi. And having smart players, coachable players, great coaches, like those guys, oh my God, those guys were such good coaches. That's how we were able to do it, man. And and it made me feel so great that we weren't doing a lot of exotic stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, just going back to first off, everything you've said, the main thing first off is the way you were able to break down your whole philosophy, the scheme, where you developed it from, how you developed it. That's what it takes from the standpoint of when someone's asking you something like, what made you do a 3-4? Well, I'm able to tell you and break it all down. That was the way you embodied and you instilled that blueprint into us where it's like, no, initially it's like, okay, what is this? And then you were able to teach it to us to where we were able to break down our scheme. We understood it to a point where you didn't have to even really coach us. We knew exactly what we needed to do and how everything fit. And I always believed in that. That's why, like you said, my football IQ was so high just on learning football and learning how everything worked. Because initially, you're just playing a position. You're in those, you're responsible for this gap, boom. But then you don't really understand, okay, if I get moved out of my gap, or if I get reached, or if I, give up too much ground, how that affects everybody behind me. And that's how you make mistakes, and then you don't really understand it until you see it on film. But by the time you see it on film, you've already gave up a big play, you've already lost the game. So it's that preventative measure of, look, this is what we're trying to do. This is what we try to accomplish. And this is how we're going to go about accomplishing it as a defense and as a collective and as a unit. And then boom, it all makes sense. It all comes together. And, just like you said, those little wrinkles of, okay, why do you play so far off the ball? I knew it from being a player. When you play close to the line of scrimmage, it made you easier to ear hole. Because, it's literally just a game of angles.
That's the thing. And I know your listeners probably don't want to hear us talk about like so much specific X's and O's, so I'll be quick, but that's what I don't like about it. You're really sacrificing yourself for the down block. Yeah. And the thing that made us so good was when we, like you and then like Dan and Steve Ann and the inside backers, and Coach Dober taught it so well, was like that +1 technique. So if we would see a pull, they would make the pull call, and that would also cause you, if you felt that down block, to come over the top. Mm-hmm. And that would destroy that gap blocking. Yeah. Because they're counting on being able to pin you down there. But whenever you come over the top, you've destroyed everything. So there's so many times you disrupted plays. Even if you didn't make the tackle, the running back sees 56 in his face. He's got to bounce it now. We got good team speed. We make the play. Our outside backers don't let the edge. Kaiser don't let the edge get it. And so we just trap them, for no gain. And you can't do that when you're up so far.
Exactly.
As good of a player as you are, even if you knew it, you wouldn't be able to get over that. You have to back up so you have that ability to get over that block. Yeah. And so anyway, but so people are always going to question. I mean, I got that as a coach too. Coaches questioning and that's in anything. Mm-hmm. When you're a leader, whatever you do, there's going to be naysayers.
Absolutely.
Someone may say, well, don't you think being so far off the ball, you're sacrificing too much? Don't you think that's not aggressive enough? There's truth in what they're saying. They're not wrong. Right. I mean, our defense, I would not categorize, even though I would say we were an aggressive defense. We were physical, but like schematically, we weren't aggressive. We were more of a reading style. So it's just, you got to believe in something.
Yeah. You have to have buy-in, and you have to have you have to be able to explain it. I think if you're able to explain it, if everybody is on the same page, you'll be.
But we could blitz too. We had the Lobo Robber. I mean, you got guys like Justin and Cameron. I mean, you can send them on a blitz. They can go. They can get the quarterback. You know, I mean, we had D linemen that could defend. You guys, it was harder sometimes. I know you probably wanted to get more sacks. It's a little bit harder because we taught reading technique.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. Like our pass rush for you. I mean, but the cool thing was guys like you and Kaiser and Torian. You know, it's birthday today. I saw, so happy birthday, Tito. You know. You guys were you just did what you just bought into the team concept.
Yes.
You know, so maybe the D-line sacks might have been higher if we played a different style, but like I think our team success was the most the way that we did it.
Yeah, and we all understood it, I think, as a collective, that listen, my job as an O's is to take up double teams and to make sure that you're in the right place, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. That's the whole thing. Going on now, so we have that great season, 2015. You decide to become a head coach, and you take on the challenge of going to Aldine High School. What was you had always said that you wanted to be a head coach, and they gave you an opportunity. So what are you walking into, and just take us through that experience being at Aldine?
Yeah, the kids at Aldine were great. I mean, you got to meet them. I mean, it was so awesome when you guys came up to support me at that basketball game and help me try to bring some of that same culture and spirit from Ridgepoint, and we had a lot of fun that night. Yeah. You know, the thing that if I could have just been the head football coach at Aldine, I'd probably still be there. But whenever you become a head coach and coordinator, you have other administrative duties, and you just kind of get pulled away from it.
Yeah.
You know, you get pulled, and then I guess that's what I cut my teeth on. I enjoyed was as a defensive coordinator, like that's the relationships I like yourself or, you know, other guys, you know, I still can you built such a strong relationship that people still want to connect with you. And then as you kind of move up the ladder, sometimes it's harder to be build that connection with your head coach. For one, they have to be over everything. So they can't pay special attention to a certain position group where you can really build those strong, you know, relationships. And also they get pulled away a lot to handle problems.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure there were so many issues that Coach Sniffen would have to handle that you guys didn't even know about that they had nothing to do with football. And that's what really got me was like the other sports. You know, you're having to manage everything that's happening in all the other sports on your campus. Mm-hmm. And so it takes away, it just was different, man. It wasn't what I envisioned. Like the cool part is you're still the leader of the football program. And so you can have that ownership, but I just far preferred being a defensive coordinator. I just kind of like having, or, you know, even I was happy defensive coordinator. I could even just be an inside linebackers coach or any, you know, position coach. You just have your group, you know, and, I just found that I preferred that, you know, and I found that was my dream, but I don't think that was what I was best suited for. And maybe I was young. Maybe if I had another crack at it, I could do a lot of things differently, and I grew and I got better. I definitely got better as a coach, you know, through that experience. But I just, you know, I was like, you know, that was always my dream, and I did it at a really young age. And so it's kind of like when you have a dream, and I mean, I was very blessed that everything happened for me.
Yes.
In my first chapter of my life, I quickly advanced. I was given the opportunity to coach really good players like yourself and the guys you bring on your show. And that helped me get a head coaching job. No doubt. 100%. Like it's the players, you know, it's not the coach. And it was my dream, but like when you get there and it's not what you thought, that's a big thing, right? Like, and I know this is not just about football. This is what I think is good for maybe your listeners is like, you may have wanted to do something your whole life and then you do it and you find out like, whoa, this isn't what I expected. That's what I was going through. Yeah. And I just felt like, man, I feel like I've got enough in the tank, or I've built up enough respect in the profession that I think if I want to go back to coaching, I can. You know, I mean, I know Coach Sniffen asked me a couple times to come back, and I know there's hopefully Coach Hammond would let me on his staff. You know, if he listens to this at Seven Lakes and work with Coach Dover, if I ever came back. But you know, I just felt like I want to try a different challenge at that point. But I could always come back, and that's what happened. So I just say trust your gut. You know, I thought since I was a seventh grader I was going to be a coach for my whole life, and it just didn't work out that way. You know, and that's okay. It's scary though to leave coaching when you're at the top. Like, man, I did all this sacrifice to get to this position. I'm going to willingly walk away from this great. You know, that was hard. You know, that's scary because I was trained in coaching. I don't have any engineering degree or anything. There's only a limited number of things that I can go do, a limited number of careers that I can go, you know, pursue now. You know, so I would say for career-wise, just trust yourself, you know, and just trust your happiness. I wasn't the same Coach Kovo, but at the end of it, man, the guy that you guys know and you guys love or whatever, I wasn't that, I couldn't bring that same energy because I was being sapped away doing other roles that weren't football, and I just found it wasn't for me, and I liked being that positive. So I just felt like I wasn't able to give enough anymore as the second year went on. And so that's why I felt like I needed to change, but I love the time at Aldine. Those kids are awesome. Yeah. And, it moved on to the next chapter of my life, and that wasn't easy, man. I worked a lot of different jobs trying to get a foothold in sales was the career I went into. And, when you're starting at the bottom, I mean, you got to start from the bottom. You take jobs that, maybe not what you want, but you're just trying to get a foothold, and they're not always the best opportunity. And I finally scratched and clawed my way to getting an awesome job of Daktronics. And so people that are in sports may know them. They make like Jumbotrons. So like Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Daktronics. Minute Maid here in Houston, that's Daktronics. That's my company. Yeah. The World Series, Globe Life Park in Arlington, Daktronics. It goes on and on and on, right? And I worked for that company, and I was working and selling video displays, Jumbotron, to high school stadiums. So it was like a dream job. Yeah. I was still working in the same place that I love. I got to be around coaches who are like my coaches are my heroes ever since Coach Kitterman, and now it's my friends that are coaching. I love them. And I just kind of found that I like that. Yeah. I'm just such a fan of coaches that I almost kind of prefer not being one of them, because when you're doing it, you're so focused on your team. You can only see your team. You have to have tunnel vision. I liked getting out. And then now I started doing broadcasting. Like I'm a high school football broadcaster. I try to do 3 games a weekend if I can. So I still go to high school football every weekend in fall, and usually 2 or 3 nights a week. And I love it. And I guess honestly, it's like my honor to interview those coaches in pregame and like meet all these new coaches. And I think the world of coaches. I always have since I was a 7th grader. And then on through, and I like being a fan. I'm like a fanboy of coaches, and I like being able to bring more, hopefully, legitimacy to their sport. Like I take broadcasting seriously. I do my homework. I prep. I do pregame interviews. I want the fans that are listening to realize like this is a big deal, and I want to try to bring as much positive attention I can to kids and coaches. And so even though I'm not a coach anymore, I don't have that honor of being that title. I'm happy that what I'm doing is hopefully bringing knowledge to that. But anyway, I guess the thing with Daktronics, unfortunately, with the pandemic, I was laid off. Mm-hmm. I was recently laid off. Obviously, the sports industry has just been decimated with COVID, cancellation of games with no fans, games with reduced fans. It's really hit the business hard. So I made it through the first round, but then I was a part of the second round of layoffs, So I'm just thankful that I had the opportunity, but it became again, like, are you just going to sit here and be upset about it, or are you going to move on? Yeah. And the good day, I went right to work. I started applying all over the place. And I was telling you off air before we started, I had a great job interview just yesterday that I think is pretty positive. I think that'll be a fit, So I guess that's my point for anyone listening. Like I've done it all, man. From coaching to lots of different sales jobs to finding your dream job after a couple of years of failing, essentially. Like I kind of felt like a failure. I mean, that's another thing I can talk. I know I'm just going way too long, but like, I was like at one point in my life, I was a head football coach at a 6A high school, mm-hmm. and I left it all to try sales, and I'm not able to find a good position that I love. And I was like, I felt like a failure. Like, is it ever going to work for me? And then Daktronics happened. Mm-hmm. And so that's my point, Obi, is just it take years, but just whatever you want to do, stick with it. Yes. Just stick with it. And then now this new opportunity, it'll still be in sports, and so I think it's another great opportunity where I can continue to do my broadcasting and be around high school football and highlight those guys that are my friends, like Coach Hammond and Coach LaFavors and all the other coaches across the city, So I'm really lucky, and it's been up and down and up and down, So that's all you listeners. It's normal, Everybody just keep. Just do, like I said earlier, bet on yourself. Believe in your plan. Don't do anything because of pressure from someone else or this, that, and the other. Just believe in what you're doing. And I think eventually with time, it ain't going to happen overnight. Like I said, it took me many years to kind of get to the roles that I wanted since I left coaching, But that's kind of my story, man. So I hope it helps.
No, it's great just to hear your journey and to hear your mentality and your approach and how You never let anything keep you down for too long. And you're a guy who always practiced what he preached from the standpoint. You would tell us, this is one of your strongest sayings, and I still live by it today. Don't ever succumb to fear of failure. Always try, always go for things. And everything you've said today on this podcast is like, this is largely why I am the way I am today. Like your influence over me, and you always believing in us and believing in us as people and talking to us and always taking the energy out to teach us life, not just the game, but applying life to sports. And I'm just thankful that I've been able to get to know you and that you were willing to come on and do this and educate my listeners, because everything that I've wanted to do with this podcast has been embodied in the things that you're saying today.
Obi.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I want to say, Darren, is we're going too long, but the thing I had forgotten I said that until I listened to your podcast of Jay Fan about that fear of failure thing. And what I'm just talking about for any young players that maybe listen to this, that you're trying to mentor, it's like hanging your head. I see that all the time. Like before, like at the first sign of adversity, you see guys start to droop their shoulders and hang their head, and then it snowballs from there.
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. Fear of failure. Like to me, it's like you're letting that fear of being in a one-on-one situation, having to cover a dude or make a tackle or go against an incredible double team from two good offensive linemen. And you're succumbing to the fear of failure, and now they're really going to whoop your butt.
Yes.
And and it's the same thing in life when you're going for your career. If you're afraid to go after what you're going to do, you're never going to achieve it. And that's what I was talking about. And last story, man, I tell too many stories, but I remember I was in college. My brother was a 7th grader playing middle school football. Mm-hmm. I was 5 hours away. Mm-hmm. I had enough time. I had an off day. I was coaching for the Austin College football team at the time as a graduate assistant. I had enough time that after I worked, or after I finished my morning class, I left around lunchtime, drove 5 hours home to Sugar Land, and I came straight to the stadium to watch his game. Mm-hmm. They got their butts whooped. Mm-hmm. And I remember they would walk off the field with their heads down. Mm-hmm. And I was fuming. and I had to go back to school that night. Yeah. So the game was over, and I had to go drive back to Sherman 5 more hours. So I drove 10 hours to watch my brother get his butt kicked and walk off the football field. Right. And I remember my mom was like, after the game, like, I was really mad. And my mom's like, Jimmy, aren't you going to go say bye to Ryan or say hi to Ryan? That's my brother. Yeah. I said, no, I have to go home. I'm out of here. I'm upset. Yes. And so I'm driving, and it was around Huntsville that he called me. I made it to Huntsville heading north. Yeah. And, my mom called, hey, Ryan's, and Ryan's like, hey, Jimmy. And I let him have it. Right. I screamed in the phone. I said, don't you ever walk on a football field again. And that's kind of that they were succumbing to failure. Yeah. And I got no problem that you get your butt kicked. Yeah. But it's like Jay was describing. You get up, and Jay has no problem with losing, but he's going to give everything to the end. And I was so mad that he walked off. And the cool story about that, and me and my brother are extremely close. I watched his career as he went on to Travis, became an two-time all-district player at Travis, offensive lineman, got a scholarship for deep snapping at Division II Central Oklahoma. I watched out all those games. He never walked off the field again. There you go. He ran off every single time, and then he would, as like the defense would come off, he'd stand on the sideline and he'd give them high fives as an offensive lineman. And you know what I mean? And he just got it, and now he's a coach. And that's the thing. Like, even though I don't have the thing I miss about coaching is guys like you and CT and Jay and all those guys that you have on your show. Like, I miss building those relationships. Yeah. I don't get to build new relationships of younger generation of guys like you. That's what I miss. That's the biggest thing I miss. That's what I've sacrificed to do other things, but at least I have you guys. And so I want to stay connected with y'all. And I appreciate you, inviting me to this, but I know we went way too long, man. Nobody probably listened to this start to end, but just be yourself, and you'll be all right. For sure, Coach. And I appreciate you just coming on and everything that you've been able to teach me and everything that you've been able to say today. And, this has definitely been a long one, but a lot of knowledge, a lot of insight. And for anybody who gets a hold of this, I'm sure that they'll have a whole encyclopedia of wisdom that they will be able to have bestowed on them. Last, I always like to finish every episode, final quick hitter, just what is your final gem that you want to say to the next generation, to, these young kids, your last thing you would want to bestow on them? Believe. There you go. Believe in yourself. We've hit on that a lot. But I mean, as far as the next generation, I think you guys are good at it. as far as more tolerance, you know, and open-mindedness. And I think that's something we discussed a little bit for like a lot of the social issues that are going on.
Yeah.
I really believe in like not telling somebody else how they're supposed to feel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You get what I'm saying with that? Like, I don't like it when I see people tell other people how they should feel.
Yeah.
And I just don't agree with that, you know, and you can never know what's happening with someone. So I try to stay away from doing that. Actually, and so the answer is to listen. Take the time to truly get to know people, truly listen, truly build that relationship, and come in with an open mind.
For sure.
But get outside your comfort zone, get to know people, and those things will set you up for success.
Absolutely. All right. Well said. That's a wrap. The quarter century mark, episode 25 of Poor Insight. Want to appreciate my coach, mentor, everything, Coach Koval, for coming on. You can catch this episode on YouTube, Anchor, Spotify, and all platforms from the podcast. Thank you.